Hey, what's going on? What's the good word? What's the good word? Someone's the chance to divester. What's going on? Hey. Um, Here, I'm gonna put in the chat the tweet. Feel free to share that tweet, retweet it if you want. Let people know we're up in here. How's everyone doing? How you doing? Yeah, I hope everyone is doing well. Hope you're all taking care of yourselves. Yeah, man. So another night. Yes. How's everyone doing? Everybody's boy, Chance the Rapper, is going crazy, man. I don't know what he's doing, but let me hit the ground running. Not gonna kill too much time with the preamble this time. So anyway, I hope everyone's doing well. How you doing, California Carbication? I Sound Info, Young Stokely, B. Scott. How y'all feeling? Harry Hines. I Sound Info. Did I say that already? Outlook, Young Stokely. Hope everyone's doing well. Oh man, you know what? This is okay, man. Tonight's not a so tired night, you know. Yeah. Tonight we're not as exhausted. Tonight we're charged tonight. So anyway, someone said they want some choice chance slander. I'm not really trying to slander him too bad. I mean, he seems okay. I mean, I'm not crazy about him, but I don't hate him either. I will say, based on how he looked, I thought his music would be like a lot cornier, and I tried it. And his rap is like normal. I thought his rap was gonna sound like Yo Gabba Gabba, and then I heard him rap, and I'm like, okay, he raps like a normal dude, so that's nice at least, you know, like. I don't know, just the way he looked. I thought it was gonna be really Yo Gabba Gabba the way, and it wasn't. But he still looks like kind of suspect to me. I couldn't put my finger on it. I don't know. And then he started tweeting like he looked, and then I started. Well, California Carbication asked, "His music isn't corny?" No, it's corny. I just thought it was gonna be worse. Like I thought it was gonna be Yo Gabba Gabba corny. Like his flow was kind of normal. Is what I'm saying. Like I thought it was gonna be really goofy, you know. Yeah. Someone said Chance is a dope MC. I mean, I don't know. I don't think he has good politics. He has real shit-lib politics. His dad is like a Democratic operator for like Rahm Emanuel, worked in Obama's White House, like really centrist, privileged, like mainstream politics. That's why he's like Chance is like a real vote-up. Chance is always on some vote-up stuff when yeah, someone said he started tweeting how he looked. Yeah. I mean, yeah, but B. Scott was saying he has good politics. So it's not really. I mean, it's good as in he's not a Republican or anything. Yeah, Kids Bop corny. I thought he was gonna sound like Kids Bop. Like it wasn't like I think he's dope. Like California Carbication is asking if that he's not corny. I'm like, yeah, he is corny. I'm just saying I thought he was gonna be like way hokier, like even worse than that, you know. Like the way he raps, when I hear him rap, it's like you gotta kind of listen for a little bit and be like, oh, like he's kind of in the Common category of corny, you know, where like when you hear Common's voice and the flow, you think, oh, this might be good. Then you hear him like, you know, talking about saving the whales and, you know, something corny. You're like, okay, this is not really that good. He's like that to me. But I mean, honestly, I haven't heard enough of his music to really weigh in hard. But yeah, this is what he said, man. And I don't know how many of y'all know about the Divest movement. If anyone's been on Twitter for a while, man, the Divest movement is crazy. It's the most insane thing. It's basically like a combination of incels / MGTOW, but for black women. And it's just really weird, you know? And I feel bad because it's making him look like really bad. And I don't think like most people think this way, but the few that do are so vocal. They're just ruining the brand. It's really bad, the way they talk. But they'll say some of the most crazy things. In fact, let me see if I can find an example because something came up. I unfortunately, what happens to me now is because I stream some of this stuff on the show and I showed it sometimes. Sometimes I show a YouTube video to you guys. YouTube can't tell if you're watching something ironically or critically or whatever. They just start flooding you with whatever they saw you watch. Like for example, I watched Michael Brooks once talk about Ben. What's his name? Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, and then like for like 2 weeks, I just got nothing but Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro. But I'll give you an example of how like crazy they are. Like they hate black men so much that they start tweeting like white supremacists. It's a really weird scene. Yeah, so anyway, go to patreon.com/champagne sharks if you want to get bonus episodes and the newsletter. We started the newsletter again. And also, I've been saying this for a while, but the show notes are coming. I'm going to spend the weekend catching up on all the show notes. It's an insane amount, but that's one of the perks as well that you're supposed to be getting, that you will be getting. But we've been doing the newsletter. We've been doing the voice and Discord chat server. And of course, the bonus episodes, all that you get if you go to patreon.com/champagne sharks, spend $5 to become a member, and you get access to like probably at this point, is it over 150 back episodes? It's a lot, but and also hit the super chat if you want. It's the $ in the chat space. If you want to support the show, that's always welcome. But most importantly, this is the most important, is comment, like, share, subscribe. Like, go to Twitter, tweet that we're up here. Go on Twitch, Also, if you're on Twitch, subscribe on Twitch too, because there's an option to subscribe on Twitch, and definitely do that. Hit us up on Twitch. I feel like I give YouTube too much love here, and Twitch not enough. And Twitch is really cool. First off, Twitch doesn't hit me with copyright every 5 seconds. That's the first thing. Oh no, the Candace Owen Mark Lamont Hill debate. I forgot about that. Someone said Chance makes NPR raps. Someone said about NPR I thought was so good. Someone said NPR is for people who are fine with warfare and drone strikes, but just want to make sure the paperwork was filled out correctly. Like that's what they get mad about. If you filled out the paperwork correctly on your war crime or your atrocity, Yeah, as far as Candace Owen, Mark Lamont Hill, I kind of want to talk about it. One thing I say about Chance the Rapper, to me, like, my only problem with him, really, with how he looks, is like he kind of looks like a baby to me. It looks very weird, But he needs to gain some weight because I feel like his head's too big for his body, and it kind of reminds me of like a Funko Pop, like. This is a weird like Funko Pop vibe to me, So it's I think he's just gotta eat a little bit more and like flesh out his body, like the hats and the shape of the head. It just looks, and the proportion of the head to the body just looks way too Funko Pop to me, So yeah, iSound Info, much respect, much appreciated. Yeah, but other than that, he looks okay. He looks normal to me. But here we go. So Chance the Rapper tweeted this, right? He tweeted this thing by a woman called Erica Hart. I'm not sure who she is, but he said, "White women and black men have it both ways. They can act as oppressor or be oppressed." This is the most glib, simplistic like shit that passes for analysis online. Is horrible. Makes zero sense. Like, but let me finish reading it before I go into why it makes no sense. White women and black men have it both ways. They can act as oppressor or be oppressed. Now here's the other thing. These types love leaving out white men And that's something I've always found very interesting. That's why so many of them are loving this Karen stuff. White women and black men have it both ways. They can act as oppressor or be oppressed. Black men may be victimized by racism, but sexism allows them to act as exploiters and oppressors of women. White women may be victimized by sexism, but racism enables them to act as exploiters and oppressors of black people. Both groups have led liberation movements that favor their interests and support the continued oppression of other groups. Black male sexism has undermined struggles to eradicate racism, just as white female racism undermines feminist struggle. As long as these two groups, or any group, defines liberation as gaining social equality with ruling class white men, they have a vested interest in the continued exploitation and oppression of others. There's a term that I want to talk about, and this is all that happens with this weird social justice movement, right? This is related to cognitive. This is related to confirmation bias, but it's a little bit different. It's it sounds like really similar, but this is what I'm going to find a nice, easy example of it. It's called motivated reasoning. But motivated reasoning basically means this. Just give me a second, because the Wikipedia description of it is a little too convoluted. I want to find a nice simple one. Okay, here we go. And we're going to get back to this bell hooks quote. But first, I want to talk about motivated reasoning. Motivated reasoning is this. Motivated reasoning is a form of reasoning in which people access, construct, and evaluate arguments in a biased fashion to arrive at or endorse a preferred conclusion. So what makes it different than confirmation bias is when you look for and see things that confirm what your bias already is. And motivated reasoning is similar, but motivated reasoning is the active form of that. Like motivated reasoning is how you actually heuristically, cognitively process information or form arguments, or how you process incoming information or see things. So one is a little more passive, the other one's a little more active. Like motivated reasoning is a little more active. Cognitive, I mean, confirmation bias is a little more passive. Like, you just, but the term motivated in motivated reasoning refers to the fact that people use reasoning strategies that allow them to draw the conclusions they want to draw, that is, are motivated to draw. So if you have some kind of motivation for something, that motivation of what you want to be true, what you want the conclusion to be true, is going to change the whole way that you construct arguments, take in information, process evidence, what you weigh extra, what you weigh less. So confirmation bias is like one of the tools of motivated reasoning, so confirmation bias is actually not wide enough, whereas motivated reasoning is a little bit broader. Like, there's a bunch of fallacies that go under motivated reasoning. Of course, people and are not always motivated to confirm their preferred conclusions. Actually, sometimes they are motivated to draw accurate conclusions. However, the term motivated reasoning refers to situations in which people want to confirm their preferred conclusion rather than to situations in which people's reasoning is driven by an accuracy motivation. So, what you have to be motivated to reason your way toward is something that you personally prefer. You know, if your motivation is to something accurate, like I'm motivated to be objectively right, that doesn't really count as motivated reasoning. Motivated reasoning is something that refers to a specific motivation. That's a motivation for what you personally prefer. And sometimes motivated reasoning can be negative. Like you might have a motivation to prove for some reason everyone hates you. You know, maybe you have some kind of masochistic trait, you know? So you just process and take all information and do all your thought process toward reaching that goal and twisting everything to create that goal. Yeah, so um motivated reasoning may be observed in virtually any setting. Any important trigger of motivated reasoning is the confrontation with a certain threat to the self. In the absence of such a motivating threat, people may have the goal of attaining the most accurate conclusion rather than attaining a preferred conclusion. The following example may illustrate the difference. Someone who wants to buy a used car will try to make the best decision possible and hence be guided by accuracy concerns to avoid buying a lemon. After buying the used car, though, however, that same person may engage in motivated reasoning to support his belief that the car is not a lemon when the first signs of malfunction appear. So basically, you know, when there's no stakes left started yet, when he hasn't committed to any decision, when there's nothing of his personal ego at stake, he can judge all the cars in the lot objectively and be motivated to be accurate. But once he buys the car and he wants to prove to himself and others that he's a shrewd car customer, he's not an idiot, now has the motivated reasoning to process all information as proof that the car is not a lemon. Yeah, so that's basically the way these people kind of work. That bell hooks thing is all motivated reasoning. And what I think the motivated reasoning is behind stuff like this is, I've had this theory before. I think these people kind of realize that America's not going to get over black men, especially straight black men. They're just not going to get over it. Like, they're just too much of a deal breaker. Like, if it's like your friend who is just too homely or too bad a dresser or just built too bad or just has some kind of problem, they can't get into the club that you want to get into. And you want to be a loyal friend. You know, you might want to give this friend a makeover. You might want to like teach him social graces, teach him how to be cool, you know, teach him not to be socially weird or whatever. But then after a while, you're like, man, I'm tired of not getting into this club. Like, ain't no reason both of us need to suffer. So you might, or let's forget a club. Say the cool kids table in school. There's a cool kids table, and then the cool kids kind of tell you, yo, come sit with us sometime or smoke with us by the bleachers or sit at our table. And they're like, wait, just you, not your friend, you know? And some people will be like, yo, that's my friend. If you can't take me, you can't take them, you know, or they might start out that way. But sometimes some people might be like, yo, why should both of us suffer? He's never going to be at the cool kids table. Like, why should I have to suffer because he can't be that cool, you know? So I think a lot of these people have come to that conclusion with black men, straight black men. They kind of realize, look, one or two here or there is fine, but as a class, straight black men are just like really tough to sell. They are viewed as sexual competition. They cause a lot of anxiety. They're viewed as like physical threats. They're kind of the scapegoats for a lot of stuff, you know. So it's like, I think the motivated reasoning of a lot of these people is right where they kind of realize if we leave black men behind, we can get the places that we need to go. But if we insist on staying with them, none of us are getting in. And since we're not getting in anyway, why should we both go down? But one thing that you'll know, if you've ever known anyone who's done this whole like ditch their friends for the cool kids, a lot of times that friend will be the person that disses the old friend the hardest. Like they'll go above and beyond even what the new kids that they're hanging out with are doing or want them to do, because I mean, this is a trope in a lot of those teen movies where the person becomes cool and the old nerdy friends have to leave behind. But sometimes like that person will want to shit on the old person even harder because it's like signaling. You want to signal and really like signal extra that, you're not with this person anymore. You want to push off of them. Like, you have more to prove too. You have more to prove because you used to be friends with this person or you look like this person. Maybe this person's related to you, whatever. But for a lot of these people, I think it's even worse. I'll take the analogy even worse. I think for a lot of these people, this isn't even an old friend. It's just someone that they, in their mind, have a distant relation to, or they don't even know that well. Maybe, it's just someone that they're kind of just associated with for whatever reason. So they're especially, but for some reason, they're strongly associated with this other person. Maybe because they're the same. It's the only other black kid in the school, or because it's they look similar, or they live in the same block and they walk to school together. So they're especially indignant about the association with this person holding them back, Yeah, someone put it's like black cops who bash black people. Yeah, or even like someone like Obama. Like Obama used to do a lot of speeches telling black people to pull their pants up. He used to say in speeches, "I'm the president of all America, not Black America," and white people wouldn't have to say something like that. But he kind of had to prove double that he's not giving black people special treatment. Hey Void 912, how's it going? I never saw Freaks and Geeks, but I mean it's based on the name of the show, and I know it's in high school. Like it's a very popular trope. I'm very sure that they had that too. They kind of had that in Heathers too. Like in Heathers, Winona Ryder has an old friend. To Winona Ryder's credit, she doesn't throw on the extras of crapping on the old friend. But I remember there was some teen movie where like the head mean girl, it was discovered that the girl that she bullied the most used to be her best friend in like grade school. I forgot which movie it was. Venmo can remember this teen movie. So, and then the good character, the good girl who was friends with the mean girl, was kind of like, wait, she used to be friends with so and so, and they were all like shocked, Yeah, so that's where I think a lot of this stuff comes from. This stuff is motivated reasoning as a way to kind of, and I think what the reasoning is to sit at the white table, but also I think to win the approval of white men specifically. Because if you notice, there's a lot of going easy on white men in all of this. There's a lot of going easy on white men, and it's just very, very, very bizarre. The way they do it, it's very, very conspicuous. Yeah, and I've seen like tweets and threads and speeches where they'll say some stuff which I think is not really backed up by the evidence. Will they say stuff like, white male racism is clunky and clumsy and weird, but it's that white woman racism that's so much worse. It really is terrorizing. I gave an example last time where that woman basically gave a talk like that, where it was kind of weird, where she was doing a little bit too much, and all her examples were basically about white women just cutting her off or not giving her attention in the feminist movement, stuff like that. So hold on, I'm gonna give some weird examples. But there's this thing called social dominance theories by this guy called Jim Sedanius, and here's a pretty interesting theory. His theory is pretty interesting, and his theory is that the targets of racism and oppression and any type of oppression or subjugation, doesn't have to be just racism. It could be the Nazis invading France or Russia, or it could be slavery, it could be Jim Crow, it could be just regular racism against black people, it could be the Nazi occupation of France, or any invading force, or the French with Algiers, right? What social dominance theory says is that the main focus of most oppression are the subordinated males. And so social dominance theory has this part of it called subordinate male target hypothesis. That's SMTH, subordinate male target hypothesis. Now, what this says, yep, that's exactly it. Someone just said it. Sedanius uses the term subordinate males. It's called subordinate males target hypothesis. And what it means is the main real targets, the people who are considered the real threats, the people who are like the main scapegoats, the shadows, the one that you project all the scapegoating and targeting on and abuse on, primarily are the men. Now, the women get it too, but the women get it based on how affiliated they are perceived to be with the men. So basically how it works is, if you look at the battle for Algiers, or just read about the Algerian resistance, or if you look at the old civil rights movements and you have pictures of, like, you know, that iconic picture where the woman punches the cop, or you look at the Black Panthers and Assata Shakur was bucking shots at the cops, the women get targeted to the level of the perception that they're identified with or affiliated with the men. So that's why sometimes you see stories like in France, there was a very big scandal because when Germany occupied France during the Nazi occupation, there were a lot of women who dated the Nazi officers, and it actually became kind of cool to date them. They were considered like these Aryan, high cheekbone, dashing guys. One of the things that France said to kind of save face was they acted like it was just prostitutes and sex workers. But in recent years, a French historian released a book. It's a pictorial book where he found all these pictures, and a lot of them were just regular women who just wanted to hang out with these and just live it up. And the guys were having it really tough. They were like the subordinate males, even though it was all white people. Like, it doesn't have to be racial is what I want to put out, but they were like the main targets of the subordination and the subjugation. And a lot of women had it tough too. There were women who were doing stuff to fuck up the French. Like there were women who would do stuff. To give an example, they would lure French guys places. There was one girl, she was young and pretty, and she would lure a lot of German officers to places where the French guys would kill them, you know? And if she got caught, they would have fucked her up. They would have fucked her up hard. Jerry Wilcox wants the name of the book. I don't remember it offhand, but I can find it. Give me a second. But the book was very controversial when it came out, and it brought up a lot of shame things with France, because France kind of didn't want to deal with it. But there were a lot of girls who were like mistresses and lived in and common law wives and girlfriends and sex partners of these German occupiers, and a lot of them made out pretty good. They got to get a lot of perks and benefits from it. You know, they got a lot of perks and benefits from it. And after it was over, when the occupation was over, if you ever heard about when they shaved the French women's heads, there was this thing where they shaved a lot of French women's heads who were known to be having sexual relations and hanging out with these Nazi officers. They publicly shamed them, held them down, made them wear I think potato sacks and stuff. If you look it up, World War II shaved heads, France, you'll see it. Okay, I found the name of the book. I'm opening it up now. Here, but I'll show this to you. Yeah, someone said getting your head shaved is getting off light. Considering, here's the book. It was like from 10 years ago or so. Hey, what's going on, y'all? Some French hackers, man, got mad. Some French hackers were like, "Zut alors, foutonner." They got, yeah. Here we go. Yeah, I think some French hackers got really some sacre bleu shit. They got, but you can't silence the truth. It's not happening. We're gonna talk about it. So T got too close to the Epstein murder. Can y'all see me? Am I back? Am I back? Because I have a little bit of delay. So yeah, Pierre got mad, but we're gonna keep dropping that heat. So let's see. Okay, cool. Let's get this going. And the page won't open up, man. The French do not want this to get out. Look at that. The French do not want this to get out. Let's see. Oh boy, let's see. Yo, Maxwell the singer was arrested. Is that what you're saying? Ah. Yo. Yo, can y'all hear me? Yeah, man. He's fucking. Yo, the French were not feeling it at all. It was not happening. But you know what? Let's see what we can get happening. Can y'all hear me at least? The whole computer shut down. Like, that's how heavy the truth bombs are. They shut down the whole computer, and now the camera is not being recognized. It's that real. Ah, let's see what I can do. Let me try to refresh this bad boy. Hold on. All right. I don't know why, but we got some. You got to look at Mario for now. That's gonna be it for now. That's it. Yeah, Chance's team is not playing. So I think we can still do this. So just go look at this instead. All right. Anyway, here it is. Chance's team and the French guys tried to put a stop, but here we go. Sex and the Stormtroopers. Damn it. Sex and the Stormtroopers. How French women fell for the Nazi invaders during the Second World War. Unpublished pictures produced in new book titled The Erotic Years. Previously unpublished pictures of French women cavorting and partying with Nazis have emerged, heaping fresh shame on the troubled wartime history of occupied France. Images show women kissing SS officers in bars and cabarets, posing in bikinis on the beach, and enjoying strolls under the Eiffel Tower. The book, titled 1940 to 1945, The Erotic Years. God damn, so much ads on this page. The book, 1940 to 1945, The Erotic Years, by historian Patrick Buisson, is set to further embarrass the French, who have never forgotten life living in close quarters with the enemy under the Vichy regime. So yeah, that's one of the pictures. A French woman poses with a Nazi officer at the Eiffel Tower during the period of German occupation in the Second World War. Despite more than 2 million Frenchmen being held in prisoner of war camps, the birth rate in 1945, with an estimated 200,000 children born to Franco-German couples. So there were 2 million Frenchmen in POW camps. And while these Frenchmen were in POW camps, the birth rate boomed. It actually went up. There was that many French women having kids with Nazis. Up to 30% of births were illegitimate in some parts of Paris. On June 14th, 1940, the Hitler Army marched into Paris and stayed for 4 years. Patrick Buisson, director of France's History Channel, TF1, and an advisor to President Sarkozy, admits that much of what happened during occupation in France has been brushed under the carpet. That's another picture. Festival atmosphere. The previously unpublished photographs show French women cavorting with members of Hitler's SS in bars and cabaret. Here's another woman. The French struggle to come to terms with the fact many women had intimate relationships with Nazi officers during the Second World War. And like someone said, this is a British newspaper, so they really love rubbing this in, right? He told Sunday Times, "We've had a difficult time facing up to what is not the most glorious page in our history. A lot of what is taught is mythology. The reality is that people adapted to the occupation." The photographs from Mr. Buisson's book were mainly found at car boot sales and flea markets across Germany, having been mainly taken by Nazi soldiers during their time in France. So a lot of the Nazi soldiers brought these photographs back to Germany. This guy had to go back to Germany. Oh, thanks for the donation, Tim Soder, much appreciated. This French guy had to go to Germany and go to junk shops and antique shops and car boots and stuff and find these. Yeah, Coco Chanel was apparently a collaborator back then as well. I've heard that as well. So this is the pictures. He says French prostitutes and other women who had sexual relationships with Germans had their hair shorn after the war as a shameful punishment. So they shaved all these women's hair, but the common story was that it was just the prostitutes, you know. During an exhibition of similar images in Paris a few years ago, the deputy mayor of the city said he wanted to be sick on seeing the pictures of well-dressed citizens shopping next to a market piled high with fruit and vegetables, giving no inkling of the wartime hardship France usually likes to complain about. Um, yeah, so it was, and they mentioned Coco Chanel too. This is Coco Chanel, and her German officer lover, Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage. And so here's the cover of the book if you want to see what it looks like. I don't know if it's published in English, if it's translated. It might be. But it says, perhaps the most high profile of the Franco-German affairs was between the designer Coco Chanel and the dashing 44-year-old German officer, Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage. It was von Dinklage who arranged that Chanel, then 57, stay at the Ritz to manage her business, even though she had closed her designer stores at the beginning of the regime change. She was recently accused of having worked for German military intelligence during the wars. Yeah. So, yeah, it was an interesting time, but this kind of goes with Sedanius's theory of social dominance theory and subordinate male target hypothesis, right? That's what he talks about. Oh, there we go. I'm back. Yeah, so that's what he talks about. And in the civil rights era, in the Black Power era, they were really going in on those black women too. They were really going in on, if you look at Battle for Algiers or the Algerian resistance, and if you ever read Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, the women were very, very identified with the men and the male cause and the idea that we're all in this together. So the women used to catch a lot of heat. But Frantz Fanon talks about how at first the French really wanted to seduce the women. They really, like, their first thing was to try to, get the women to their side, but the women would be setting them up in traps and doing stuff like that. And then after a while, they had to start stomping the women as hard as they stomped the men. But the first option was to try to give them the opportunity to collaborate, or they tried to kind of sexually colonize them first. That was the first avenue. That's usually the first avenue. And that's what Sedanius's theory is about, and it gets a lot of grief. Jim Sedanius is out of Harvard, and he has a female partner in his writings called Felicia Prado, and they do pretty good scholarship, so it's pretty tight. So it's not easy for them to discredit his scholarship, but what they do is they try to ignore a lot of it. They try just not to talk about it a lot because it messes up what intersectional feminists call their theories, which a lot of them are this idea that being a woman and being black combined makes you extra oppressed, where if you're a woman and you're black, you're oppressed because you're a woman and you're oppressed because you're black. So you actually have a double oppression, whereas a black man only has one axis of oppression. And then if you're black, gay, and a woman, then you have a triple axis of oppression. And there's a lot of data, there's a lot of studies, there's a lot of things that show that it's a very simple and seductive way of looking at the world, but it doesn't really pan out. It doesn't really pan out in reality. And there's a lot of, I have some guests who are going to talk about it from different angles and stuff. One is a gay black researcher who's found something interesting. He's a PhD student, but he's doing a lot of good work right now. And there's another student who's also a PhD student, but they're doing a lot of work. And they've been finding that, for example, it's a lot more complicated than this simplistic, just add your identities together. They've been finding that a lot of white people, when they see a gay black man, it actually serves to de-racialize him in their minds. That rather than just saying, "Oh, he's black," combined with gay, combined with, so now he's doubly oppressed. What they say is the gayness deracializes them unconsciously in the mind of white people, and not only deracializes them, but kind of whitens them, so that what's interesting though is that it hurts white gay people, right? Because this was really interesting. It deracializes both of them. So a gay white person, although still seen as white, is seen as less white than a straight white person. So being deracialized actually works against the gay white person. But the gay black person, it has the opposite effect. When the gay black person gets deracialized, the man, it ends up unconsciously whitening them in the view of the white people. I'm going to give you the names of the people. One guy, you can look it up yourself. I'm going to have them on at some point. We've agreed to it. They're going to appear on the show soon. But I'm going to put their names, and you could find their you could find their papers and their work if you want to look at it yourself. This is their names: Justin Preddy and Christopher Petsko. If you Google them and you find their studies, you can find what I'm talking about. And Jim Sedanius is a social dominance theory guy. He's the one who has subordinate male target hypothesis. So yeah. So it's like it's the point is, it's not as simple as just add everything up. And honestly, even a lot of intersectionality doesn't really say that. A lot of intersectionality is actually a lot more nuanced than that. If you ever read intersectional invisibility theory, those papers, they actually don't believe. And this is the same thing for, I forget her name. Oh, Kimberly Crenshaw. Kimberly Crenshaw constantly says that oppression is not additive. She actually says this, but the people online and in the media and the blue checks, they keep pushing this very simplistic version of it that she herself has said is not true. That's kind of what's really ironic. Yeah, like, so what she actually says is this is Kimberly Crenshaw's recent tweet. She even says it so, because she has to keep reminding people intersectionality is not additive. It's fundamentally reconstitutive. Pass it on. Now, this doesn't mean intersectionality still isn't wrong in its ontological focus is, but it's at least not that simplistic in its wrongness. Like, it actually is wrong in a lot more nuanced way. But yeah, they push the simplistic notion of intersectionality because they believe it gives them leverage. Also, I think the more complicated version still gives them some leverage, but I think a lot of these people are just too lazy to parse it. Like, these people don't really read a lot of the literature. They just want to read like bell hooks, because bell hooks is very low calorie. There's no citations. There's no real academic jargon. It's very populist in its prose, and also it's much easier to convert people. If you're going to be like a cult, it's much easier to convert people with glib, superficial, easy things, than the nuanced stuff. This is interesting. I believe this. When Crenshaw pointed this out at an event, she remarked that it was European scholars from the Netherlands that were supporting the adding of identities but coming up with more identities. One of the reasons why I think they do that is because I believe it. The additive theory of oppression makes it so that white people can get in on it. Because what happens is, if all you have to do is add and not treat it as a reconstitutive thing, then I can be like, okay, you're black. Sure, you're black. Okay. You're black and you're straight and a man. Okay, that's fine. I may be white, but I'm disabled. Like, if you see how much they throw disabled in there now when they talk about oppression, and also when they talk about disabled, the bar gets lower and lower. Like, someone will be like, I'm neuroatypical, and the person seems totally normal to you. And you're like, you know, what do you mean neuroatypical? Do you have like hardcore autism or something? Goes, oh no, I just get nervous a lot. I have anxiety disorder. It's like, okay, like that gives you a whole slot. Like, they flatten everything so that every oppressed identity, like even like being a geek now is like an oppressed identity, right? So now it's like I'm a neuroatypical geek, disabled slash bisexual slash this and that, and it allows them to kind of act like they can add up and be as much as a black person. It's almost like a type of oppression envy, I think, sometimes. And the more nuanced intersectionality, while still wrong, and while I still think kind of gets things wrong, at least doesn't make it easy for other people to just piggyback, you know? Like, yeah, so it's like, yep, it becomes post-structural and makes it easier to be ahistorical in their analysis and critique of power. Something else, too, about if you read a lot of this literature, it bogs people down, because I've been reading a lot of literature. I have a bunch of it out here. Like, these are all a bunch of papers and stuff. And one thing that started happening is, it took me forever to parse it, but as I parsed it, a lot of it just is constantly arguing about who's oppressed more than others and trying to rank them and come up with competing theories. And I think the word for it is ontological, but what ends up kind of happening is you just keep ending up arguing your existence and where you rank and everything, but there's no real actionable anything to it. Like, the subordinate male hypothesis theory, I think, is kind of very simple. You know, it makes it very simple because you don't have to rank 30 groups. You just have to know men are considered the biggest threat. If you neutralize the men, then the oppressor feels safe. Anyone who is working with the men is considered an enemy. If you're not a threat of a male, or if you're a woman who is not loyal to the men, you can get by. Like, men who were traitors and who were defectors and stuff like that, they were able to get by too, but they kind of were in a precarious state. You know what I mean? Because there wasn't much that the oppressors really wanted for them. So you kind of had to be doing something or be very much a traitor to kind of have favored status in that type of thing. Like those Jewish guys that would oppress other Jewish people in Europe during World War II. They would do things like try to give over to kids. They would do all types of messed up things. And even after all of that, the Nazis still, I think they were called the Judenrat, the Nazis still threw them in and killed them. The most famous one ended up getting turned on by the Nazis. But there is value to being a woman that there isn't to being a man. Like it's a sexist, misogynist ideal, but women are a resource. You know, sperm is cheap, but eggs are expensive. So it does help women better if they make that choice. Someone said Thomas Sowell. I don't know what that is. I mean, I know who Thomas Sowell is. I just don't know what you're saying Thomas Sowell in reference to. Yeah, I need some kind of context. I just see you saying Thomas Sowell. But I want to show you guys something that's very interesting, right? Something that's happening is very interesting. Is the whole weird divesting movement that's happening has, whether deliberately or accidentally stumbled on social dominance theory and subordinate male target hypothesis theory. Like, I don't know if they were doing it on purpose. I don't know if they just got lucky and independently came up with it, but they came up on their own with basically this theory that as long as we separate from black men, we're going to be okay. You know, the police aren't out to get us. The police are even our friends. It's not a big deal. Just if you don't identify with the men, and he started doing things like calling. This was really interesting. He started calling black women who insist on being black first. They started calling them things like pro-whack. Pro-whack is their term for pro-black. Like, if you're pro-black, you're pro-whack, and the idea is just give up on the idea of nationalism, on the idea of defending black people, because it's a lost cause. If you give it up, you know, it's kind of like those women who were selling out the French officers. I mean, the French officers with the German ones, you know, they're not going to be saying "Vive la France." You know, they're not going to be saying that. You kind of have to conspicuously be anti-nationalistic, but they started using terms like male-identified women, which is very interesting because I think Sedanius uses that, but I don't think they're reading Sedanius. I just think they've kind of stumbled on the same idea. So they're talking about male-identified women, and then they call male-identified black women, they call them mammies now. That's the term they started using. They really like slurs. I don't know why. They really like white supremacist slurs. So yeah. So they call them a bunch of names. It's really interesting. It's disturbing. It's disturbing, but it's interesting. But yeah, it's a little bit crazy. Bear with me. I'm just pulling up something because I want to show you guys something else. But yeah, if you go on YouTube, and YouTube started recommending all this stuff to me ever since I played a video during one of the live streams, because that's how YouTube is. It thinks you want to hear the stuff all day. But I'm gonna put one up right now.
And Kindle kind of the same time, some years back. And
so this one is called One-Sided Loyalties for Mammies, Pick-Me's, and Mules. So these are some of the slurish names that they call black women who are pro-black. They call them mammies, Pick-Me's, and mules. And they're mules because they're being used for supposedly someone else's struggle, even though it's the black struggle, but they've convinced themselves that they're not black, or that they're their own race, kind of.
Sat and listened, and I watched, as well as knowing things that I did know, to kind of put things together like a puzzle to see what's really going on. And this video is called One-Sided Loyalty is for mammies, pick-me's, and mules.
Unfortunately, this video is
And
long. I hope she gets to the point
a lot of
quick.
black women they're just not going to listen. They're not going to take heed of any message that's given to them to benefit them. So for divested women and swirlers, it's just time for you to just be separated from them, because the things that Miss Brooke.
Now you see what she's saying. She's saying don't just be separated from black men. She's saying be separated from black women who won't listen to you about leaving the black community alone. So they're kind of realizing that the problems in the black community are localized in their minds, that those are the targets, the black men. And if you leave them alone, you're going to be okay. But on top of that, if you've got a woman, friend of yours or whatever, who doesn't want to listen and insist on still being pro-black or being, and to them being pro-black, whole community, that includes being black men, being down with black men. Like, to give you an idea how messed up this logic is, I saw a video, and I swear this is true. There was a divester who had a black husband, and she was getting mad at this black woman with a white husband, because the black woman, despite being with the white husband, was still very pro-black. She was going to marches. She was going to Black Lives Matter. Like, she just happened to have a white husband, but she wasn't anti-black. She didn't put down black men. And to them, this woman was like, I'm a divester. This is how weird this logic is getting now, how weird they're getting. I'm a divester, but I'm not a swirler. As in, I have a black man, but we don't do anything with the black community. He's not allowed to do anything with the black community. He's not allowed to be pro-black or be whatever. He's kind of considered divested himself, but this woman, even though she's with a white husband, she's very pro-black. She's into the causes. She's fighting for black men who get shot by police. So she's actually, in her mind, even though she's with a white husband, this divester with a black husband thought that she was actually more black man identified than she was. As in, she kind of thinks, yo, being black as a stigma, as an oppressed class, is a male thing. So if you're sticking up for oppression, you're in Blackistan. It's very nuts, like the logic. So I'm gonna give you an example. So this woman, you see what she's saying? She's saying, stay away from the black community, stay away from black men. But not just that, if you've got a female friend or whatever, and they want to still ride with the black community. And the reason I brought up the other story is your female friend doesn't even have to be romantically involved with black men. She just has to support blackness as a cause or as a social justice cause, and that's enough to leave her alone, and you will live your best life.
Brooklyn Blue and or Kendall St. Charles have been saying for years is the truth. And I'm
By the way,
to
feel free to
see a
share
lot of
this
it
on your
more
social
and
media,
more and more
because we're
and
gonna get deep into
more
this.
and more and more. The more I'm looking at this, and the more I see all of this, how one-sided loyalty is for mammies and pick-me's and mules in Blackistan, because they get so angry when they see swirlers and divested women saying they're divested, or women that are swirling. Because with this economy and things that's going on right now, I was reading an article about rent and evictions and
what's funny with these women is they do a lot of reading, but this is what I'm talking about before, motivated reasoning. They process, like, they've decided, they've tapped into either independently or who knows, maybe somehow these women are reading Jim Sedanius and somehow have decided to warp it to because Jim Sedanius is not prescriptive. He's not telling people, hey, this is what you have to do to win. Stay away from the subordinate male targets. He's just describing a process. If anything, it's a way to help you kind of fix a lot of these oppression problems. If you can kind of figure out what the mechanism is of oppression, it helps you address it better. You see what I mean? But these women have kind of stumbled onto the same insights as Jim Sedanius, but this is where the motivated reasoning comes in. And I want you to hear, like, they're always reading articles, looking for stuff, and using it as an excuse to quote unquote divest from Blackistan, turn on black people. You know, they're like, look what's happening with the rent, and look all this stuff. Like, they always find a way to use motivated reasoning to lead them back to you have to leave the men in the community alone and live your best life in a selfish, individualistic way. They just don't want it to look selfish and individualistic. So they try to put a nobility on it, and also try to frame it in the most terroristic ways possible, that black men are terrorizing them so bad that they're being forced to do this. Because it's like how the French women, if there was an equivalent in the Vichy France, an example I gave, like, you see those women getting their head shaven, how decades later people still look at them as traitors. People are still ashamed of them, like going on 80 years now. Even other women, people around the world look at those women with shame. So you kind of see why they have to throw black men under the bus really bad. Because if you want to be the modern day version of that, if those women were able to say, that the Nazis weren't so bad, that's the reason why these women always leave out white men or downplay white men in their criticism, because it would be like the equivalent of downplaying Nazis. Like, you know, if you could say, hey, the Nazis weren't that bad, they didn't do a Holocaust, so there's only a handful of them, or they were only doing microaggressions on the Jews, you know, okay, that fixes one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is if you can make it seem like the Frenchmen were just insane, like, you know, sacre bleu, you know, there's the smacking like women left and right, you know, and hitting them with baguettes, you know, and shooting them and doing whatever. Now the story kind of changes, you know. Now you just who can blame you, you know? So that's kind of what all this is. Like, this is where this is all coming together. Everything I'm talking about, the motivated reasoning, the social dominance theory, and all these different things.
And how it's going to affect black women the most. A lot of them don't even see all this stuff that's getting ready to hit economically, while they were too busy worried about racism and all this stuff. They should have been focusing on their finances, but they weren't. They were too busy worried about racism and worried about all this other stuff instead of and what the black men are doing, and or the black males are doing, and what they're not.
Essentially saying the racism, which, you know, includes black men. Most of this cop racism, 94%, and this is not exaggeration, this is a literal stat, 94% of the black people killed by cops are straight black men. Well, no, black men. 94% of the black people killed by cops are black men. So when he says racism and it's cop protest, she means black men, but also she explicitly says black men too on top of that. So you don't have to speculate. She says it.
Finances. But they weren't. They were too busy worried about racism and
thank you for the donation.
All this other stuff instead of
Tron 6. Appreciate it.
And what the black men are doing, and or the black males are doing, and what they're not doing, and they don't understand that a lot of this stuff that's getting ready to come to pass is going to come to pass fairly soon here. I see it. Brooklyn Blue, Kendall Saint.
I mean, you get the point. GM GM Playfair asked this question, and I'm guessing that you missed the earlier part, but what I was saying is that by these people's logic, and it's the same logic that happens with Jim Sedanius. Jim Sedanius says this too. Racism does affect Black women, but it affects Black women to the degree that they are considered identified with Blackness as a total class, as a community, which includes men, or invested just in Black men in general, or specifically. Like, now here's the thing: if I, as a white person, just look at a Black woman, there's no way I can tell just by looking at her that she has turned her back on the Black community, has quote unquote divested or whatever, and that she's not, a threat. She doesn't have to have the abuse rain down on her. Like one example was, if you watch, and I know this is not historically accurate, whatever, I know this is a movie, but it kind of shows the thought process. You got to think whether this is historically accurate or not. You got to think a white man made this. So at the very least, if it's not historically accurate, he's betraying his id, right? What happens is, and this is something great. I'm gonna talk about this too. So remember there was Sheba, the mistress to Candy, and she had a pretty charmed existence in the household. Like Stephen was a subordinate male who was a sellout, but even his existence wasn't as nice as Sheba's, okay, yeah. So but if you just look at a Black woman, there's no real way to just know right away that, hey, she's divested. She not only is not not down with Black men and the Black community and Black causes, but she's hostile to it. There's a way you kind of have to signal it, and I think that's why these people tweet so much, they make videos so much, and they kind of have a look and a uniform to them a lot of the times. They kind of really try hard to cultivate certain looks. So it's like 2 or 3 looks that they have. So now see what GM Playfair asked here is a great question. It says, so the high rate of Black maternal deaths is a myth, or racism that happened to Black women? And that's not what it is. What it is if you're a Black woman and you're having babies, are you with a black husband? Did the Black husband bring you there? Are you going to produce a Black boy? Like, there's different ways you can be subconsciously deemed to be loyal to the race as a whole, or to Black men specifically, and if you look at Frances Cress Welsing, and her theory of white genetic annihilation, or just their own words, white genocide, or is a word that alt-right uses, or the term replacement theory. So many of the shooters have been about demographic. They believe Black people wage war, demographic war, just by reproducing. So by reproducing and keeping the race alive, including producing new Black men, especially if they produce the new Black men for a Black man, or produce any child for a Black man, like anything that's perceived as being, that's the type of loyalty, being willing to reproduce more Black people. So that in a way kind of gets you on the shit list too, that's why I think a lot of people, if you look on YouTube, who swirl, are really, really over the top performative with it. They have to really, really signal, I am really, really, really not down with the shits with Black, either by showing that they're really antagonistic toward Black men, or showing that they're really, really crazy about white men. That's why some of these people are so over the top with their performative thirst for white men. If you look at this crowd, they're really over the top performative. And I'm gonna show y'all something. Hold on. And white racists are starting to see it themselves. They're even joking about how so many of these fake anti-racist feminists are really worshipful of. But before we do that, I want to show you something that I found really interesting today. Someone said assimilation through hypergamy. Yeah. Look up Jim Sedanius' stuff. I've been trying to get him on the show forever, and I have not gotten to respond yet. But it's very interesting. But I saw this tweet today. It's very interesting. This woman tweeted this, and she's one of these people. She goes, "My dream is for Black women to exist as individuals without being attached to Black men. A lot of the treatment we receive in society stems from our association with Black men and the fact that we claim them all as our quote-unquote brothers. If we abandon them, Black women's image would greatly improve." Now, this might be a fake. I used to think these people were always fake and that they were white supremacists. But ever since YouTube, when so many people started showing their faces or giving their voices, I was like, okay, there's a lot of women that think about this like this. But also, when you look at this woman, it's a cartoon avatar. She's tweeting, and there's no voice, there's no real face. But the replies to her, a lot of them were real. So it's kind of like, even if one particular individual is fake or whatever, there's a lot of people who are not fake who are agreeing with these talking points. And they have their pictures showing, their profiles have their Instagram accounts. They're making YouTube videos saying the same thing, So at the very least, like, these trolls are either creating talking points or they're parroting them, that a lot of these real people are saying. But if you look at this is all Jim Sedanius' social dominance theory and subordinate male target hypothesis. So subordinate male target hypothesis, but they've made it prescriptive instead of descriptive. They've made it into something where it's like, wow, this could be like, you know what it's like. They have these books about manipulation and narcissism and narcissistic abuse, where people read them to kind of learn how to guard against abusers or manipulators or whatever. And I remember I knew one guy, he was like a really sneaky guy, and he used to read books like that. Like, one was called Who's Pulling Your Strings, and it's all about like manipulation. But to him, it was an instruction manual. He, like, any information can be used any way depending on the person's motivated reasoning, and this is more of that motivated reasoning thing. So he was motivated to manipulate. So he took all the information and used it as a prescription to manipulate people. I know people who have read 48 Laws of Power, but they had no desire to manipulate anybody. They just used it to kind of defend against messed up people. So I knew a really nice girl. She used to like to read 48 Laws of Power because she worked in a really shitty workplace. And she started realizing why so many bad people were getting ahead. Even though the book in its own writing is trying to be prescriptive, she didn't take it that way. So these women, I don't know if they've actually really found Jim Sedanius. I don't know if they've coincidentally, in a genius way, unlocked the same insights through a different route. And it's all coincidence. I would love in a way to see them actually start reading Jim Sedanius, because I'm sure they will take it to some crazy places. They will become like, there's this some of these communities, these hate communities, because this is a reactionary community, it's not really any different than MGTOW or incel or anything, but there used to be this black MGTOW, black manosphere movement, full of like hateful black guys. It's called the Negro manosphere and stuff, and they're really kind of angry black women. And there was this woman who wrote this book called Daughters of the Trade, right? Daughters of the Trade is an interesting book. Daughters of the Trade is written by this white woman called Pernille Ibsen. And Daughters of the Trade, what's interesting about Daughters of the Trade, the premise of the book is kind of supports social dominance theory as well. The premise of Daughters of the Trade, right? Here it is. I'm going to show it real quick. It's a very interesting book, and it kind of supports social dominance theory. Daughters of the Trade, Atlantic Slavers and Interracial Marriage on the Gold Coast. Severin Brock's first language was Ga, yet it was not surprising when in 1842 she married Edward Carstensen. He was the last governor of Christiansburg, the fort that in the 18th century had been the center of Danish slave trading in West Africa. She was the descendant of Ga-speaking women who had married Danish merchants and traders. Their marriage would have been familiar to Gold Coast traders going back nearly 150 years. In Daughters of the Trade, Pernille Ibsen follows 5 generations of marriages between African women and Danish men, revealing how interracial marriage created a Euro-African hybrid culture specifically adapted to the Atlantic slave trade. Although interracial marriage was prohibited in the European colonies throughout the Atlantic world, in Gold Coast slave trading towns, it became a recognized and respected custom. Kasar, or keeping house, gave European men the support of African women and their kin, which was essential for their survival and success, while African families made alliances with European traders and secured the legitimacy of their offspring by making their unions official. For many years, Euro-African families lived in close proximity to the violence of the slave trade. Sheltered by their Danish names and connections, they grew wealthy and influential, but their powerful position on the Gold Coast did not extend to the broader Atlantic world, where the link between blackness and slavery grew stronger, and where Euro-African descent did not guarantee privilege, like in other colonies where they had the one-drop rule and all that stuff. By the time Severin Brock married Edward Carstensen, the world had changed. Daughters of the Trade uncovers a vital role interracial marriage played in the coastal slave trade, the production of racial difference, and the increasing stratification of the early modern Atlantic world. Now, that whole book is very interesting because it's a testament to the idea of social dominance and subordinate male target hypothesis. These African women were able to intermarry and gain status and get rich by marrying into the slave trade. They were, if they had remained loyal to the tribe or African first, or nationalistic, like you guys are ruining the Gold Coast and we're going to unite as a people against you, they would have been decimated like all the men were. But similar to the French thing, they're able, I don't know what this person Earjay is saying, but what was interesting about it, right? What's interesting about it was all these like black manosphere guys. This woman is just telling a book. She's not giving some kind of pronouncement on black women worldwide. She's not giving a pronouncement on the role of black women historically. She's just a white woman who wrote a book and whatever. She became kind of an icon among these black MGTOW types, right? Where she every time she does a video or a talk, a whole bunch of these black incel type guys come in and just be like, "Oh, that's right, give it to those bitches." You know, this shows like they're doing the same thing about like they really hate these women are just looking for anybody or anyone who's going to say something bad about them. So even though there's just an academic book that doesn't profess to make any fundamental attributions about Black women during slavery as or African women or anything of this point, dude. So I think that's what you're just saying is now people have been ignoring these people for years. It hasn't stopped them. They've just been growing. Like, I'm flattered that you think that we have the power to make them, but they're a reaction to white supremacy. This is a survival method that they have created. This is brain trashing. I'm Black. I don't have the power to make them do anything. Like, you're buying into their logic because part of their logic is that Black people are driving them to this. Whiteness is an appealing bargain. It's an appealing thing to bargain for. My attention or lack of attention has nothing to do with what they do. You know, it's like that's their logic. Their logic is that they're being driven to all of this by the Black community, by people telling them they talk white, by people harassing them. And this is getting normalized. That's the other thing. And if you think it's not, you're wrong. The whole world's becoming incel, men and women and stuff. But the reason I was bringing up the Daughters of Trade book is that not only is there an example of motivated reasoning and social dominance theory. What is interesting about it is that the same way these kind of crazy Black incel guys have made this woman an icon, she's constantly disavowing them. Whenever this professor, the author, does a YouTube video, it's just full of like Black male trolls, just celebrating her and treating her as an ally against Black women. I would not be surprised if, and this is one of my predictions, I would not be surprised if that book, Daughters of the Trade, gets discovered by this weird diverse crowd, and then they themselves start using this book as a Bible, the same way like that guy that I told you about who wants to be manipulative used Who's Pulling Your Strings as some kind of Bible to manipulate people when the book is actually intended to just describe things that abusers do. You start using it as an instruction manual. I wouldn't be surprised if they start subscribing that book as a reading list or like a motivational book. It's such a weird, strange time where everyone is bringing their motivated reasoning and their agendas to everything, and everybody is looking for everything for affirmation. They want their shows to affirm them and affirm their choices and affirm their beliefs. They want their they want reality. They want their jobs. They want history. Everything to affirm their beliefs. You know. Sorry, I'm depressing people. Okay, sorry to depress y'all, but I'm just gonna say one last thing about Chance. I just want to go back to Chance because I want to show where this is coming from with Chance, and then we'll talk about other things. So this is what Chance said, and I want to put Chance into the social alienation is real. People, and do you know how you know the social alienation is real? Think about this unprecedented quarantine that we've been subjected to, and think how weirdly well-adjusted people have been to it. I mean, people are kind of crazy and stir crazy, but it's not as big a deal as I think it would have been in other eras. And I think it's because a lot of us are spending all day looking at our phones anyway, in our own worlds, in our own heads, isolated, alienated, streaming, binging, watching TV. Even if we're at work, we're staring at a computer screen all day. We don't know our neighbors. We don't know our friends. We don't know our kids. We don't know our parents, really. Like, the mental shift to be in forced isolation, I don't think has been that big a shift for people. And that's kind of now I'm gonna talk about this real quick because this is something very good comment. Someone said, T, you are talking about extreme cases like crystalline kerosene. However, this behavior has been normalized by women like Zolina Maxwell and Kamala Harris, who exclude black men every chance they get. What that's called is hyperreality by Baudrillard. And this is I've talked about it in the podcast. If you listen to the podcast, hyperreality, and I apologize for people who have heard me say this on the podcast, but sometimes everything is somebody's first time, you know. So I don't want to treat someone like I want to treat every video or stream because someone's first time ever watching me. Hyperreality is this paradoxical concept by Baudrillard, and it kind of goes like this. Something that's hyper real is something that's more real than reality, but it's also something that's kind of it's so real that it's fake, you know. It's more real than the real thing, but it has a very specific function that's paradoxical. And I'll give an example. Same examples I always give. If you look at Vegas is a town that's just full of everything being transactional and disposable, and everything human just being priced and for sale. So Vegas is just gambling, empty consumerist hedonism. Like it's just individualistic transactional hedonism taken to its worst extreme. Is just people stepping over homeless people on the strip to get to the casino, gambling, drinking, prostitutes, stripping. And what do people say? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Vegas is portrayed as the opposite of the real world, right? Vegas is portrayed as the opposite of the real world. Like, the real world is moral, the real world is decent, the real world is responsible, it's morally upstanding, and life has value. And Vegas is supposedly the opposite of that. And when you go to Vegas, what stays in Vegas is what happens in Vegas was to stay in Vegas, right? But what hyperreality says is that Vegas is not the opposite of reality. Vegas is actually reality concentrated, reality squared, if you will, right? But the purpose of the hyperreal is to convince ourselves that the real is actually the opposite. So we tell ourselves, so the real lesson to take from Vegas is that, wow, the real world is like Vegas, the fiction of Vegas being the opposite of reality, as opposed to being hyper reality, is to allow us to convince ourselves that we live in the opposite world, right? So when you go to Vegas and it's all hedonistic, it's all full of sex or whatever, you get to go there and enjoy it and indulge in it. B, you get to get it out of your system and whatever. You get to go into the shadow world. And then C, you get to reassure yourself by how exaggerated it is. You get to convince yourself that the real world, the real square world that you live in, is nothing like Vegas. That it's not just full of transactionalized sex, cheap life, being ruled by money, everything being a gamble. You get to convince yourself that you live, and that's what hyperreal does. Hyperreality allows you to convince yourself you're living in the opposite, when the real lesson of hyperreality should be how bad the so-called normal is actually getting. So to put another reason, to put another example, like Disneyland is a hyper-real version of LA or California. Like, people think Disneyland is supposed to be an escape from the reality of California, but the real lesson of Disneyland is that it's an exaggerated version of California, and that California itself has become a theme park, you know, but by exaggerating what's really happening, you're able to preserve the fiction that this is an isolated extreme case, and the everyday version is the opposite. Does that make sense about what hyperreality is? That's what I think these divestors and stuff have kind of become. They've become this kind of hyperreal. Same thing with male incels. All these extreme groups of the internet are hyperreality. They're all things. I'll give you another example of hyperreality. Prison. You're looking right now in these protests, people kneeling on people's necks and not getting in trouble. People allowed to criminalize and violate rights at will. Cops can come in, shoot you, abuse you, do whatever. What really makes life on the street in a police state that much different than life in a prison, where you have no rights of privacy, no avenue to fight back against the cops, no way to punish the cops when they violate your civil rights? You're presumed to be guilty. Like, for people, particularly black people, prison is a hyper real version of their everyday existence, and that's where these protests kind of happen. Like, they made the reality too close to the hyper reality, and the illusion was broken. And that's why we're in these. That's why we're in these struggles right now. You know. So we're in these struggles because the cops and everybody, they fucked up. They, like, the way that the hyper real aspects of the society are meant to be this kind of pressure spigot, something that helps relieve pressure, you know? Without the hyper real places of Vegas, of Disneyland, of prison, as a contrast to the reality, you're faced with nothing but the choice of facing what your reality has become. You're forced to realize that your fucking reality now is nothing but a giant, glorified glass and steel and plastic Disneyland prison state theme park. And Vegas, that's all your life is, you know, full of strip clubs, capitalism, things that combine all those things, like Hooters, you know, tacky, cheap, imported shit, cheap life, helicopters flying over you. I mean, the hyperreality is like everywhere. If like the person in the gated community, and with the degraded, downward mobile life of, you know, losing things, can let the poor people be his hyper reality. So yeah. Hyperreality accommodates cognitive dissonance. So all this stuff on the internet is because internet's so disembodied from reality, because internet is anonymous and allows people to create avatars of themselves and exaggerate it. WRAX and STEM. The YouTube is a little more popping, you know. He's on Twitch. I gotta say, I mean, I need to be the Twitch more popping, but I don't know how to. But yeah, so that's what this thing is. So what he says here, John Thompson, that's what's going on there. Is that, but the same thing with like incels, like people laugh at incels and the frustration of white male incels and all this stuff. But when you talk to a regular person who's on Tinder, who's frustrated with what dating has become and all this stuff, you kind of realize, like, there's a little bit of that incel energy in the regular world now, you know. But one thing people like to do, everyone can point at the incels and laugh and say, "Thank God I'm not them," but they don't realize that the incel is a hyper real version of what dating and male entitlement has become. And the incel plays like a valuable role in society because they're like the hyper real things that we use as a spigot, as a pressure release valve for society's shadow side, the dark side. It has a lot to do with scapegoating. Scapegoating is a very powerful concept in primitive societies where you assign all the sins to something and then kill that thing or beat that thing, you know. Yeah, so I want to see what's going on in the chat. I want to make sure I didn't lose everybody in the chat with some conspiratorial stuff. But but that's what is the trick of when people say ignore these people, they are trolls. People say, oh, these people are trolls, they're fringe groups, don't pay them any mind. But that's one of the beauties of the hyper real. The hyper real creates this easily scapegoatable small target. And then when people see that small hyper real target, it allows them to think, oh, instead of looking at them as a canary in the coal mine or a concentrated version of something that's happening in the real world, and then that's a sign of a bigger problem, you think, don't pay attention to those trolls. They're too small. They're too little. That was the trick of the alt-right. And that's the whole way up until Trump's win. People didn't realize the alt-right were a hyper-real version of a larger white resentment growing, you know? So people were just like, why we care about a bunch of 4chan trolls? They're like 5% of the population. They're nobody. But their ridiculous, caricatured, cartoonish version of entitlement and racism, whatever, was something that was a hyper-real version. It was created precisely in parallel to a larger sentiment. That's why people like Richard Spencer or Milo Yiannopoulos could easily transport themselves to the mainstream. You know, people have been. I mean, why is Milo able to go right to Bill Maher and whatever? Like, because especially after Trump won, people kind of realize. Remember, after Trump won, they started hiring all these white right-wing people everywhere. They started hiring Megyn Kelly here. They started hiring JD Vance and started looking for all these people because they kind of realized later, oh shit, this is, even though like the people with the Pepe flags and trolling all day with anime and tentacle porn are extreme, they're tapping into something. A lot of Fox News grandpas were, when they discovered Milo, like they were loving Milo, you know. Yeah, so yeah, Barry Weiss, the whole New York Times section is just basically that. Barry Weiss, Brett Stevens and stuff. They kind of all realized that, oh, wait a minute. So, and that's the kind of trick of the hyper real. That's why they miscalled Trump's support, is that the exaggerated, easily caricature version distracts you from the more normalized, more widespread, more ingrained version that is actually everywhere. And the more dangerous, more ingrained, more toned down, more subtle, more nuanced version of the hyper real, by virtue of the contrast, is able to pretend that it's the opposite. It's which ties into Carl Jung in the Shadow. We can get really deep if you want to on Carl Jung in the Shadow and how Carl Jung's concept of the shadow totally and scapegoating ties into that. But I'll save that for another time. But going back to Chance, I want to put all this together to kind of paint a picture of Chance, because Chance is buying into this stuff, and I don't think he's really buying into it. But I think what Chance is doing himself, is a version. I think what Chance is doing himself is a version of this. What Chance is doing is, and this is what a lot of these like kind of male feminists do, is they're like the men who were, they were like, we can't come up as much as the women in Vichy France. Or Steven is like, you know, I'm not going to have as prized a place as Sheba, with Calvin Candy, but you know, I'll take what I can. Like, and what's interesting, what I'm trying to say is that even the subordinate male target hypothesis theory, there's even men who, if they self-neuter, if they self-castrate, to a degree, they can cash in too. So I think in addition to these swirlers and divestors, and again, the key is not to look at the extreme cases, but to look at how normalized all this is getting, you know, because one of the things about that book, the one that I talked about, 1940 to 1945, sexual occupation in France, I talked about earlier, there was a lot of guys who got along too. You know, they didn't get to live it up like the women. They weren't able to party and whatever, but they were able to keep their heads down and run successful businesses. They were able to service the officers with their businesses and run errands for them and do all this stuff, you know. So back to this. So I want to take this sentence by sentence. I already read this, but white women and black men have it both ways. What's the first thing you notice? White men are left out, right? Because if you're trying to hack social dominance theory and subordinate male target hypothesis, you have to side with the winner, you know? So you're not going to talk about the Germans. You're not going to talk about the Nazis, but you might badmouth the Nazis' women's back home. Like, you know, if you want to become like the mistress and maybe eventual wife of the German soldiers occupying your world, it's in your interest to badmouth his wife back home or badmouth the Nazi woman. You know what I mean? So this is like the equivalent of badmouthing the Nazi women back home and the French men. You know, if they, because you know they didn't know the Nazis were going to lose. You know, if they so they weren't really trying to hide anything. But if they could have done it all over again, they would have been better off. This is what they could have done, but downplay how bad the Nazi men are. Badmouth the Nazi women because they're the competition for the Nazi men, and demonize the Frenchmen. So the Nazi men kind of become your rescuers or something that you were driven to, right? But white women and black men have it both ways. So again, white men are left out. They can act as oppressor or be oppressed. Which how can black men oppress anybody when they don't have any power? They can be misogynistic, they can be bullying, but oppression is a systemic thing. You have to be able to do it as a group, and you have to be able to, like, it's like systemic racism, right? Like a black person can be bigoted against a white person, but they can't actually oppress a white person in a system of white supremacy because they don't control any institutions or organizations to oppress them with. Like black people can't keep white people as a group from being gainfully employed. They can't criminalize them and make their whole lives criminal and create a white a prison industrial complex with just white people. Like they can do violence. They can beat you up. They can maybe kill you. They can name call you, you know, which is all like horrible stuff, but it's not oppression because they can't get away with it. When the cops come, they're going to lock you up. They have no access to a system to help them get away with it. It's not like Emmett Till where like everyone knows who killed the people who killed Emmett Till and the whole town is in on it, and you know the whole trial is just one giant joke and everyone's yucking it up. And it's all individualistic acts. It's not like a whole system where you can like oppress them. And it's the same thing with black male oppression. Like black men can't systematically oppress anybody. This is not to let them off the hook for the bad things they do. They do, but they can't systematically oppress, which is what oppression is, right? So black men may be victimized by racism, but sexism allows them to act as exploiters and oppressors of women. White women may be victimized by sexism, but racism enables them to act as exploiters and oppressors of black people. Now, this is that simplistic additive theory that I was talking about, that even a lot of the more respected intersectional feminists who are academics don't even preach this simplistically. But here's the problem with this, right? If the idea of thinking that black people are just photo negatives of white people, so you can just take white society and how white men operate in white society and just say black people are just the photo negative of that. But white men can oppress white women. Black men can't really oppress anybody, but not just that. White men are able to use their maleness as an immunity to oppression, but black men can't. And this is the better way to look at it, right? This is the better way to look at it, as far as I'm concerned. The trick that we kind of get into with all the simplistic analysis, this glib simplistic analysis, is that we take things like white male privilege or white male patriarchy, and we take it to think that there's no oppressive axis around being male, right? And then the other thing that we take when we look at white women is that we see that they're in general subordinated to white men, and then we tell ourselves, wow, there's no actual benefit to being a woman, because so there's no downside to being a man for white men, and there's no upside to being a woman for white men. But what you really have to look at it is as an equation, as a net. So the better way to look at it is this: there are downsides to being a male, even for a white man. Like you die more, you're a bigger victim of homicides, you're a bigger victim of suicides. You by far make up most of the people in prison compared to the opposite gender of your race. You get killed by the cops. White men get killed by the cops even more than black women, by like a lot. Higher rates of suicide, depression, poverty. There's a lot of bad things to being a white man. So just being a man doesn't automatically confer you all these immunities or whatever. What happens though is that when you're white and a man, being white activates all the plus sides of being a man. And those plus sides, when activated by whiteness, so far outweigh the downsides of being a man that it makes white men the top dogs of the world. So instead of the simplistic view that white men start at zero when it comes to oppression, and then white women are like at -1, then black men are at -2, and then black women are at -3. What you really have to think about it is that the net effect is that white men are on top, but something bad does occur with being a man when it comes to even for white men, and for white women it's the same thing. There's good things to being a woman. Being a woman, you're have things that you can do that men cannot. You don't have to die in wars. You're free. You don't have to go to prison as much. You're able to be to marry up in a way that men can't. You're not as pressured to succeed. If you succeed, it's considered a bonus, but you can also marry somebody rich and come up that way. There's a certain amount of patriarchal protection that you get from white men if you're a white woman. So, but the thing, so they do worse than white men in a lot of ways, but there's something that they do better at than white men. But here is the problem. Those benefits of being a woman that come with being a woman only get activated if you're white. So the benefits of being a man only get activated to their fullest if you're white. They only get activated for a woman, the benefits of being a woman, if you're white. Now, black men only get the downsides of being men, and black women only get the downsides of being a woman, with very little of the upsides, because they don't have the whiteness that it takes to activate the upsides. So this idea that, so when you think of it that way, you start realizing that this idea that black men have privilege that offsets the blackness because of their maleness, it doesn't work, because the male privilege needs whiteness to exist. The maleness without the white privilege, it's like a bullet without, it's like bullets without a gun, you know? Like, wow, here's a bunch of bullets. You know, you're as well off as the guy who has bullets and a gun. And it's like, no, his bullets with the gun are gonna beat my bullets in my hand every time. Like, I can't just throw these bullets at him. I can't do anything. With it. That's what maleness is like in the hands of blackness. Like, whiteness is the gun that fires the power of maleness. So it's like, maleness doesn't exist in a vacuum by itself, decontextualized from race in such a way that you can just evaluate and it just has power. There's nothing that's just called maleness that just exerts power and does anything. Same thing with femininity, with being a female. There is nothing that like all those privileges that white women get for being white women. I mean, for being women, black women don't get that. When a white woman shows up with being pregnant and, you know, shows up somewhere, a lot of white men will get up, give her a seat. She's considered like the prime of white womanhood. Look, it's a white mother continuing the race. They'll bump her up to first class or whatever. And a black woman shows up pregnant, people aren't falling all over for her like that. They look at her and they think, oh, I wonder if she's a welfare queen. Oh, there goes another jigaboo birthing those pickaninnies. Like, you know, they imagine she probably has a bunch of kids. She's just a birthing machine. They wonder if she's on welfare. Like the gender benefits, male or female, get activated by whiteness, and the downsides of being male occur to everyone. They occur even to white people. I mean, even white men experience the downsides of being male. It's just that the upsides of being male, thanks to being white, destroy the downside to the point that it's still the best deal in town, right? So that's the whole problem with this really simplistic thing that they're having. Like, that sexism, meaning being a man, allows them to act as exploiters, oppressors. No, because being a man without being white, just no. Neely Further says that there's no such thing as a black man. There's just black males. So the bullet, let's call the bullet being male, but the gun with the bullet is what makes you a man. Like, being male without being white, you're not really a man as far as having access to patriarchy, you know? And no, the formula doesn't ignore wealth and class. It doesn't ignore wealth and class at all, and I'll tell you why. Because being white, part of being white, and this is something that has actually been studied. That full access, the full benefits of being white get activated by your wealth level. So, but in addition, being white helps you get wealthy. It goes, whiteness and wealth kind of have a reciprocal relationship, but they have done studies where people actually seem or be perceived less white the poorer that they are, right? So when people are actually poor, they're able to activate the benefits of being white less. They actually get perceived. They've done like all these kind of priming and unconscious tests and association tests. So whiteness implies class, but class also kind of helps determine your whiteness. And so there's an extent to which poor white people are actually perceived as less white, and as a result, have less access to the protections of being white. So that's why if you see poor white men, they end up suffering the bad aspects of being male almost as bad as poor black men, but thankfully they still have some whiteness to put them on a higher level, right? So poor white men die in bar fights more, die in homicides more, make up by far most of who's in prison. They make up, they die more in suicides. They are sent to the army more. They end up having a lot of the problems that black men have, but the amount of whiteness that they do have still is able to activate at least some of the privileges of being male to some degree. But but being wealthy, having class, is able to activate those things more, both directly because you have money and you can spend and buy things, but also like studies have shown, having more money actually increases the level to which you're perceived as white by people. It's a very interesting thing when you look up the psychological studies. Like psychology is like my hobby. I always like looking it up, and I view racial issues through psychology, you know. But this is exactly it. That's why the Irish weren't white. But also, it's also a big reason. And if this is what the book Settlers talks about, and this is what a lot of class reductionist leftists kind of miss. David Rodinger talks about it with the wages of whiteness, how whiteness is a wage. If what you're saying is true, and it's class and race that activate the powers of being male, right? Then if you're a white person and you don't have money, think about how much more important whatever whiteness you have becomes. If those are the two things that are helping you out and are activating the full power of patriarchy for you, your whiteness and your wealth. When the white person becomes poor, the whiteness becomes extra important. That's number one. Number two, if wealth is important for being perceived as white, if you're poor, your whiteness also becomes more precarious. And I want you to think about that. It sounds kind of simple, but it's nuanced. It's a little bit heavy, right? If wealth and class increases your level of whiteness, you almost have a surplus of whiteness. That's why rich white people are very comfortable checking the privilege all the time. They have a surplus of whiteness. They can make concessions and give up whiteness and still have whiteness to spare. But also they have money, so the money is also a weapon too. Like the money's important on its own aspect. The money and socioeconomic status is important on its own aspect, but it's also important as an enhancer, an increaser of whiteness, right? If you're poor and white, you A, don't have the money, and B, you have less whiteness. That makes your whiteness more important. That makes you value your whiteness more because it's A, all you have, and B, it's precarious, it's dangerous. And that's why this idea of just giving class programs to poor white people is just going to get rid of their ideas of racism. Noel Ignatieff, Jay Sakai, David Rodinger, who wrote the books are Wages of Whiteness, How the Irish Became White, Settlers. They all talk about this. There's so yeah, it doesn't leave out class at all. Class is a constituent force in whiteness, right? It's actually class. Class is not something different than race. Race is a class, and your race is actually informed by your class too. They've done studies where when Black people become richer, and one of the guests that we have coming up, this is in that Christian. If you read the papers by Christian Petsko here, he shows that when Black people are able to signal a higher socioeconomic status, and then they quiz people with implicit association tests against them, they're actually perceived as less racialized. They're perceived as less Black, and actually start being perceived as more white through the socioeconomic class signaling. Like they get deracialized. So there's a very complicated relationship between. There's a very complicated relationship. Is what I'm saying makes sense? I hope it does, but the studies are like really complicated, and it took me a long time to even tease them apart and everything. But like psychology is a very underexplored avenue for examining race, and I think that's why Frantz Fanon is so interesting, because he's one of the few people. Bobby Wright and the psychopathic racial personality was another one, but a lot of people more like to use sociology or whatever. But you get to some really interesting insights when you do. Yeah. So I don't know Robin Kelly, but I've read his stuff. But anyway, let's see. Let's continue. But what's complicated about this, right? The idea that Black men, in addition to whiteness enhancing the benefits of being a man, enhancing the benefits of being a woman, Blackness, and this is one of those ontological things discussed by Frank Wilderson in Afro-pessimism, and he talks about this a lot. He was a recent guest on the show. Blackness exacerbates and exaggerates and increases the downsides of being a man and a woman. So in addition to not having the access to the good aspects of being a man or a woman, thanks to not having whiteness, the bad aspects that both white people and Black people and other races share of being a man or a woman end up being intensified by Blackness. Like, if you want to bring race and gender intersectionally into math, the way that I'm doing it, I think, is the more accurate way, or the way that Jim Sedanius does it. But look how hard it is to explain and to tease apart. If you just tell someone really simple, Black good, no, Black bad, white good, man strong, woman weak, and you just add the ones and zeros, it's very attractive, especially to people who think simplistically. I gotta tease apart this question. How do you explain the people who want to gain whiteness by forced sexual proximity, like this tweet? Well, I think it's like a daughters of the trade thing. It's not so much as just a sexual proximity, but your active disavowing of your race, particularly the men of your race, I think that deracinates you too. It's called racinating. If you're deracinated, you've been viewed in a deracialized way. The verb form is deracination, and then racination is when the racial aspects are like infused in you. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Like first off, if you get a proximity to whiteness, there's the impression that you have a higher socioeconomic status. So if I walk somewhere and I'm surrounded by 20 white people, I live in a white neighborhood, I do whatever, I'm automatically perceived to have a higher socioeconomic status as a white person. I mean, as a black person, that higher socioeconomic status. If you look at Christopher Pesco's studies and other people's studies, it will then imply that I'm kind of seen as deracinated and also as more white. So, but also the aspect that I don't have a black partner, but in addition, I have a white partner might make me be even seen as more white on top of that. Then how do I speak? What kind of signaling do I use? Like, I don't think it's any simple one thing. It could be a constellation of things, Yeah. So it's WRX and STEM. I'm not ignoring the chat. Everything comes up at once. But it's just that 90% of the stuff is on YouTube. He thinks I'm ignoring Twitch, but I'm not. It's just that I have one giant screen, and then it ends up being mostly YouTube. But the other thing is, they've taken away two things, right? If black men are 94% of the black people killed by cops, if black men are by a large by a large margin, the number of black people in prison, if black men are far and wide most of the black people killed in homicide, then how can you say black men only suffer racism and not sexism? Because the Exoneration Project with the false rape accusations, who's exonerated in false rape all the time? It's black men. They're by far the leading exonerees, despite making up like 6% of the American population. They make up 6% of the American population, or 7%, but they make up a majority of the people exonerated. Who was lynched more in the South for who was the target of most miscegenation laws? Black men. Who gets racially profiled more? Who gets stopped and frisked? Now, this is not a contest. This is not to say, because black women have their own unique gender depressions too. Black women get really treated badly at hospitals. They get really treated badly by social services. They get really treated badly by sexual violence. Like, for example, I'm sure when it comes to getting sexually assaulted by the cops, I'm sure black women have black men beat by a lot. Like, this idea is a zero-sum game, and it's not part of the simplistic thinking that one person has to take the sex discrimination and one person has to take the racial discrimination, and then one person can have both, and both black men and black women both face unique gendered sexist assumptions and exaggerations. And oppressions. Look at Christian Cooper in the park with Amy Cooper. And the things that she was threatening him with were specifically gendered threats. She called the cops in Central Park and says, "There's a scary black man." I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exact words, but she kept emphasizing that not just that he was black, but that he was a man and that he was like scary and angry, And that's something that works with black men. There's unique ways that black men are scary and attract punishment that black women don't. And there's unique ways that black women attract punishment that black men don't. So this kind of idea that men are immune from sexism but women aren't is silly, and it starts at a misunderstanding of how, because these people just think of black people as white people in blackface with slang, and all this stuff, they're not able to really if they have a misunderstanding about white people, it carries over to misunderstanding about black people. So because they think white men are unique from gender depression, and that white women have a monopoly on gender depression, as opposed to thinking both of them have different gender depressions, but white men are able to call on more benefits to the point that the net effect is that they're number one, right? Once you understand that white men have oppressions as well as white women, but that their strengths and plus sides more than compensate for it, then when you get down to looking at black men, you're able to realize, okay, even if you think of black men as just white men in blackface, you'll be able to understand, okay, so this is all the same bad sides of a white man, but minus the whiteness and the socioeconomic status to offset it, right? So yeah, so the levels of misunderstanding that this fake deep fool is spreading with this simplistic shit, about, because once you say that black men can't suffer from sexism, you kind of ruin a lot of the understanding of the oppression of black men. But not just that, you take away a lot of their case, a lot of their story. Like, you're blatantly taking away somebody's justice claim, Yeah, gender depression hurts and affects everyone. It's just that some people are able to call on other things like money, whiteness. Whiteness is a strength, is a characteristic. It's something that helps you. It's an asset, to offset it. So to a large degree, reverse sexism is bullshit, particularly in the case of white men, because overall they do better. Whiteness activates way too many benefits for them, for their oppressions, especially if they have money. If they're poor, it might be more of a toss-up. But this idea that maleness is just this magic property that anybody can use and just reap the benefits out of it, it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. Same thing with being a female. There's a lot of things that being a female can open doors for you in the world, but mainly if you're white. If you're a black woman, not so much. But if you're a black woman that can signal deracination or seem white in some way, same with black men. If you're a black guy, like, you could be rich, you could be successful, you could signal that you're deracinated in some way, it can help you too. But the problem is with subordinate male target hypothesis theory and social dominance, the ability to deracinate, the ability to whiten yourself is a lot more limited for a black man, because the males in a subordinate group are considered the prototypical example of what that group is. That's one thing that intersectionality gets right. It just draws the wrong conclusion of. Intersectionality has this kind of state that they have this thing. They have this phrase: all the blacks are men, all the women are white. And the idea is that black men are considered like the prototypical, or the thing that jumps to mind when people think of blackness. Like, they think of black men first when they do the studies. Like, that's and when people think of whiteness, they think of white men first, right? When they think of woman, the prototypical woman is a white woman. So bear with me. The prototypical man, if you just say man in general, forget white man. If you forget white person, if you just say man, the prototypical man, what people think of is a white man. If you say black, just use the word black, the first thing people think of is a black man. If you say woman, the first thing people think of is a white woman. Now, this is called intersectional invisibility theory. Intersectionality uses this to say that black women are kind of seen as invisible, and as a result, their needs get overlooked, right? It's called intersectional invisibility theory, and it's a paper by Valerie something. Oh, Valerie Purdy Vons. It's called Intersectional Invisibility: The Distinct Advantages and Disadvantages of Multiple Subordinate Group Identities. It's by Valerie Purdy Vons and Richard P. Ibach, if you want to look it up. But what doesn't get realized is if blackness is, like Frank Wilderson says, and Afro-pessimism is like the ultimate mark of slave, the ultimate mark of oppression. In a strange way, they agree with subordinate male target hypothesis, right? If subordinate male target hypothesis says that the main target in any oppressed group by the oppressor is the male. The female gets targeted to the extent that she's considered identified or supportive of the males in the group. That's why Assata Shakur is in exile and all this stuff. She was busting shots alongside. She was on some Bonnie and Clyde stuff, you know? Now, in a strange way, intersectional invisibility kind of agrees with this. Like, if intersectional invisibility is saying that all the blacks are considered men, if blackness is the worst thing you can be, then in a certain way, black women get the kind of option to opt out. So they're presenting it as a negative, like, oh, we're invisible, we have invisibility. And social dominance theory agrees with them in a way, but poses it as a strength. Like, your invisibility, the fact that when people think of blackness, they don't automatically think of you, that you're not the prototypical blackness, that's actually an escape hatch. And that's the big conflict right now that I think is going to pop up. This is my prediction. I think it's going to be a war between the swirlers and the intersectional feminists, because the intersectional feminists have decided, hey, this invisibility works for us. We can opt out of Blackistan. We can opt out of being considered black. If everyone thinks that the main prototypical black person is a male, then as long as we distance ourselves from black men, as long as we distance ourselves from the black community, that intersectional invisibility can work to our favor. If we get our money up, if we get all this other stuff, we can even deracinate and be honorary white. Whereas the intersectional feminist, her story is that she wants to pretend that being black and a woman gives her double oppression. So although they're both kind of united in the pathological hatred for black men, right? They're both kind of pathologically hating black men. The divestors and the swirlers want to divest from so-called Blackistan. You know, they don't want to be the leaders of black people. They don't want to be centered in black movements. They're happy with intersectional invisibility. They're fine with subordinate male target hypothesis. Let you be the target and not us. There's no incentive in them to present themselves as being as oppressed as black men, as making them, they're not trying to come up as the head of protest movements or whatever. Whereas the other black men are trash crowd wants to come up by taking over black movements, by censoring themselves. So they both want to leave black men behind, but one wants to leave black men behind by taking advantage of intersectional invisibility. The other one wants to leave black men behind by making themselves the prototypical thought when you think of blackness. They want to make themselves like the Black Lives Matter and that crowd, the intersectional crowd. They want to make a black woman the first thing you think of when you think of blackness, a black queer person to be the first thing you think of when you think of blackness. So I think I'm going to stop it there because the tinfoil kufi, how bad is the tinfoil kufi tonight? Is a tinfoil kufi making sense tonight? Is it? I feel, you know what I feel like when I get in this zone? There's a white guy who does documentaries like this. Adam, he's a British guy. He does hyper Adam Curtis. Yeah, I'm in my black Adam Curtis zone. Like Adam Curtis. Like this is my tinfoil hat Adam Curtis, tinfoil Kufi stuff. But yeah, I think there's gonna be some weird stuff that's gonna happen on these scenes, but it's weird, but it makes sense, and there's evidence for all of it if you follow the studies. It's just one of the good sides about academia right now is that everything is about there's a lot of talk about systemic and structural stuff, and that's good, but I feel like psychology gets kind of a short shrift, and psychology right now is doing some really great work in race that's kind of getting ignored. You know what I mean? It's getting, yeah, I mean, I try to make everything kind of make sense, but so if you look at the rest of this thing, you see how it falls apart. Like so it says white women can be it says both groups have led liberation movements that favor their interests and support the continued oppression of other groups. Now these people just say things and nobody calls them on it, but if you think about it, what have black men done that have benefited them but allowed black women or black queer people to continue getting oppressed? Like, can anybody in the chat name what she's talking about? Like, she says both groups have led liberation movements that favor their interests and support the continued oppression of other groups. For white feminists, you can say that. White feminists have done a lot of stuff that have only helped white women and left black women in the dust. What tangible accomplishments, what tangible legislation or whatever have black men created during the civil rights movement that benefited them and left black women holding their thumbs? Can anybody think of something? Because we just let people in society, because it's so cool to bash black men. You can say anything and no one even like bothers to even think. They're just like, oh, that sounds good. But I want someone, can someone think of anything? For example, what social benefit can you get as a black man that a black woman can't? I can think of plenty that black women can get that black men can't. If a black woman doesn't have a man in the home, she can get a whole bunch of money. She can get money to go to school. She can get a lot of things. Education, food stamps. I'm talking about like with benefits. Everything is either helps black people as a whole that has been legislated for, or has loopholes or whatever that allow women to take advantage of it more than men. Like what the thing that's scary to me about this stuff, right? The thing that's scary to me about this stuff is the likes that this stuff gets. This gets 13,900 likes, 4,000 retweets, and none of it is empirical or proven. None of it makes any sense if you think about it half a second. The only thing I've seen ever specifically targeted for black men was My Brother's Keeper, and people gave that thing hell, right? So, I mean, that's why I think bell hooks is so damaging. She has no citations, no proof for anything. She just says whatever. And because it's simple and easy to grasp and glib, and because of the motivated reasoning, because people have a motivation to believe this stuff, bell hooks' claim and appeal all comes purely from motivated reasoning and confirmation bias. And you can tell by all the unsubstantiated claims that if you think for 5 seconds about, don't hold up, right? None of this holds up if you think 5 seconds about it. And if you read bell hooks' books, she does not put citations for anything. I'm not making that up. She only has one book with citations. It's her first book. It's an academic book, Ain't I a Woman? And it was a worst-selling book. Once she started doing this type of stuff, she's very prolific. It blew up. So black male sexism is undermined struggles to eradicate racism. How? Name the ways. She never does. She just says it, and people just go with it. Can anybody in the chat name ways that black male sexism has undermined the struggles? You know? See, like, some people say leadership positions, but I mean, maybe to a degree, but Black Panthers had a lot of women in leadership positions, and right now, even if that was the case at some point, I mean, right now you can't say that's still the case. We have Black Lives Matter. We have We the People. I mean, right now, Black women are running these things, and there's not really anything tangible that these people have produced. It's, but I mean, the leadership positions. I don't know. There's, as long as these two groups, so this comparison of that Black men have done to Black women, what white women have done to Black women, is simply not true. Because, like, right now, white women are the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action. They have come up so much. They've done all that lean-in feminism and done all that stuff with equal pay. Meanwhile, they're actually getting paid more than Black men, which gets left out a lot in the wage gap talk. That white women make more than Black men and Black women. That Blackness is a bigger determinant of your wage than being female. Yeah. So this idea that Black men have come up and benefited and lined their own pockets in the Black struggle to the extent that white women line their own pockets at Black women's expense in the women's struggle, none of this adds up, And it goes, as long as these two groups or any group defines liberation as gaining social equality with ruling class white men, they have a vested interest in the continued exploitation and oppression of others. Like, that doesn't make sense in a couple of ways, because I mean, that's neither here nor there. But let me see if there's any last thoughts before we go. Yeah, it said you can see the sexual resentment in her takes. Yeah, her takes are pretty bad. They're pretty terrible. Let me see if I can end it with any final thoughts that pertain to any of this. Yeah, but Chance the Rapper is a mess, and he has no, like, people will get mad at J. Cole for what he did with No Name and say, like, he doesn't read, he needs to be like educated, and he needs to listen. And then someone like Chance the Rapper will just spout pure nonsense, just say it's from bell hooks, and he'll get away with it. And to me, it's what he's doing is more ignorant than J. Cole, because at least J. Cole just wasn't reading books. Like, Chance the Rapper is like spreading theories from books that are downright terrible and dangerous. It's downright dangerous and anti-black male. It's horrible stuff. But I want to put some more stuff up real quick about the way things are going right now and the way things are headed. And I want you to keep your eyes open for something. And you're going to see this a lot. Neely Fuller says that the genius of white supremacy is that white supremacists place themselves on both sides of every argument about race so that they win either way. Now, to go back to the thing I said before, poor white people get way more invested in their whiteness because A, the whiteness is more precarious, and B, they don't have the money that gives them extra benefits and protections from the downside of being male or female. And they also don't get the money which helps enhance their level of whiteness. That's why they're very hostile to the idea of being told they have white privilege, being told to check their privilege. It's the last thing they have. They can't spare it. Whereas rich white people have like an overflow whiteness. They can check it or whatever. So, like, on one hand, in this argument of white supremacy, the white elites are like, we can make concessions to the Negroes. We can give up some of our privileges because we hold all the power. And like, I don't care if you get the big bedroom in the house a couple of days a week, because I'm the one who owns the house. You're still the guest. You know, I have stuff to say, you know, but the poor white person doesn't own the house either, you know, so he cares about competing for the biggest room. I want you to look at, whenever you look at any culture war going on regarding race, I want you to think which faction of white supremacy is on both sides of this argument, and how does white supremacy win when this happens? How does white supremacy win when this happens? And I want you to think about that with Black Lives Matter, because right now Black Lives Matter is the horse that the white elites, that the white liberals have put their money on. That's their horse in the anti-racism game. Those are the people like they want to win. Those are the people. Oh, thanks for the donation. Is that Gabriella? Oh, thank you, Gabriella, for the donation. Someone said Gabriella made good points. I missed them. Yeah, unfortunately, I was in my tinfoil zone. So I'll just see it on the replay, right? But I want y'all to look at what they're doing right now. There's one side that's like, fuck Black Lives Matter, fuck giving up white privilege. We got to put more of our knees on black people's necks. Fuck all this stuff. Then the other side, you have the woke anti-racist. But what are they doing? What are they pushing? You know, and they are placing themselves as on the side of the good guys. But to me, they're the other wing of white racism. And I want you to look at what they're doing. This Times new cover, America's Most Changed. First off, there's a black woman. Notice the black woman looks tired. I find that very interesting. They made her look very tired. Damien Young is in there. He's the guy who wrote the article, Black Men Are the White People of Black People. So he's in this article. It's pretty interesting. Inside the woman's hair is the sign, I am a man. And there's rioting and protesting. What was interesting about this article, a lot of divestors got really mad at it. And I'm going to be honest, I've never said this before. In a strange way, I kind of agree with the divestors for once. That they're kind of showing the face of struggle, the face of protest. But they were wrong. They were mad at it. But of course, being who they are, they took it to the wrong place, and they took it as masculinizing black women. To a degree, I think maybe there's something to that. Like when it's time to show struggle, when it's time to show protest, they show a dark-skinned, phenotypically black, tired woman, you know. But if it was time to show beauty, they would show like a light-skinned Rihanna or Beyonce or somebody who may be dark-skinned but has a lot of phenotypical white features. Like, but what I thought interesting was where is the man? If this is a moment that's centered around police brutality, and most of the police brutality in the black community happens to 94% men, why is there not a man here, right? Why is a woman the face of it? And this is kind of, to me, like a low-key diss handed out as a backhanded compliment. Like, when it's time to show your revolution, we're going to show the women leading the revolution, but we're going to tell you, black woman, that we're giving you a compliment. Like, you're the leader. We're censoring you. You suffer just as much from this as black men do. But low-key, what they're kind of doing, I think this is how they center themselves on both sides of the argument. They're telling them, you don't even have a man to fight for you. You don't even have, and in her hair is, and this is tinfoil kufi time, in her hair is the sign, I am a man. she is a man. See, that's racist love. Yeah, that's racist love. Frankly, is racist love. She has the I am a man. And what is I am a man? I am a man is not a current sign. That's a sign from like the 60s. Those pictures are like old military uniforms, old tanks. That's an old protest. So the I am a man is almost like she's internalized it. She's the man now. The I am man is in her hair. She looks tired. She looks dark skinned. She has natural hair. The men protesting are in the past. If there was a warrior class, there's not a warrior class now. Your warrior class is done, but we're going to pretend that we're giving you a compliment. And that's kind of the big hustle that white feminists always did to black women, was that they would tell them you don't need a man, you could do it yourself, and help us fight for more things for women. Then the white women get the more things, but then on top of that, they go back and marry a white man, and they even at the end of the day, Gloria Steinem married a white man, and meanwhile encouraged got together with the rest of white society to encourage that the black family unit was endangered. Just the whole way that welfare is structured, that incentivizes a man not being in the home. And this is kind of what they do. They give you a backhanded compliment that's secretly a diss. And that's what this is. Now look at Rolling Stone's cover that came out too. Rolling Stone does their own cover, right? And what's interesting is people actually got mad and demanded the covers to change. They got really mad. But Rolling Stone did a cover, and Rolling Stone's cover is pretty interesting. Rolling Stone's cover is pretty interesting too. You can see it there. Yeah, it's emasculation versus erasure, but it's also masculinizing the woman. And it's a low key diss to the woman, but it's also part of that social dominance theory, that subordinate male target hypothesis. We're willing to work with you. We will allow anti-racism to work. We will allow anti-racism to win the day if you promise to only allow black women and black queer people in. We'll let them in, So if racism is what Jim Sedanius claims, if it's social dominance theory, if it's subordinate male target hypothesis, right? Liberals and conservatives are both practicing social dominance theory in their own way. They're both practicing subordinate male target hypothesis, but in different ways. The conservative is just like kill them all, crush them all. Whiteness, privilege, status is precarious. We don't even want to let the women in. They're probably sleeper agents anyway. Just crush them all. We enjoy the act Thanatos. We enjoy the power, the destruction. Kill them all. The liberal is like, I'm elite. I have whiteness to spare. I can check my privilege. I can be white fragility all day. I have enough money that I can even have weird kinks with my race. I can hire these people to even be my black BDSM anti-racist people who will flog me. Like rich people have the weirdest kinks, Poor people are more likely to just straight up have sex. Rich people have the time, the leisure time, the indulgences, the money, the whatever to get involved in weird kinks. So that's the same way with the anti-racism. Like these weird findom BDSM relationships that they have with black people. So their subordinate male target hypothesis, their social dominance is, hey, just let the black women in, let the black queers in, especially if they're willing to be very vocal about signaling a distance from black men, if they're willing to demonize black men as patriarchal, if they're willing to say that black men are as bad as us, as bad as white men, that they have no moral high ground, let them in, who cares? They're not a threat to us. We have privilege to spare. Plus, these people, we can use them for fun and games. We can use them as mascots. we can use them as human sex toys. And this crowd makes sure to signal that they're down to be used as human sex toys. That's what slave play is. That's what a lot of these long tweet threads that they do, like always thirsting and always debasing themselves all the time. They're signaling, we're willing to be mascots. We're willing to be sex toys. We're willing to be bludgeons that you use to bludgeon Blackistan, right? Now, look at this other cover. And Ava DuVernay celebrated this. Tap to behold the full cover by Rolling Stone by Kadir Nelson. It's so beautiful. And then what do you notice about this cover? This is Rolling Stone's cover. This is the other one that people started protesting. There's a black woman at the front line. There's a child. So basically, the black community, and there's a bunch of allies in the back. I can't really see a black man. There's someone who might be a black man. I'm not sure, but there's mostly like white allies and stuff. There's some black men off to the side, I think. It's hard to tell if they even are black men. It could be androgynous black women. But the front line, what's incomplete? There's a black woman, natural hair. There's a young boy. There's no male. There's no warrior class. This is what social dominance theory wants. This is what subordinate male target hypothesis is. Y'all can come over, the man can't. Right? Think about that. Yeah. Doing Leslie Jones routine for Chris Evans. That's an example of that type of, or what Tiffany Haddish does all the time. You know, it was very kind of grossly self-deprecating. So yeah, look at this. But where is the black man on the front line? He's on the shirt dead. So the only place for black men in this utopia is to be dead. Right? The white men are in front of the black man, but the one black man on the front line, he's dead. He's on a shirt. So there's a living black woman. There's a living black child. And the black man doesn't appear as part of the warrior class or a leader. He is dead. So the liberals' version of social dominance and subordinate male hypothesis theory is the black men who will make it are either going to be queer, they're going to be dead, or they're going to be eunuchs. And they're going to vocally signal that what side they're on, that they are accommodators. Right? And I mean, this is not a bad idea. Maybe she takes Blackistan and turn it into like a positive. You know, the same way Trump took fake news and took it. So yeah, so I want you to peep the propaganda and how liberals and conservatives are really on white supremacists on different sides of the same thing. This is what Neely Footer says. White supremacists paint themselves on both sides of the argument so that they always win, right? The black child has 3 years before he ends up too threatening, but they'll try to make him a carefree black boy before that happens. That's what they're going to do. They're going to put flowers in his hair and make him a carefree black boy. That's going to be their solution. Actually, there's more to this. Let me go back to this. If he doesn't become a carefree black boy, they'll put him in jail, or if he doesn't become a carefree black boy, he doesn't become like a eunuch, like someone who writes articles like black men are the white people of black people, you know, and signals that he's a eunuch, right? Then he'll die or go to jail. Here is, somebody told me this, right? Someone said, hey, T, there's a hole in your theory. The New Yorker, this is the same magazine, the New Yorker did an article a couple of weeks ago by the same artist. This is by the same artist. And they're like, look, there's black men in this one. So if you look on the right side, somebody says, to be fair, same guy did the New Yorker cover this week. The issue isn't there. So he's trying to tell me, like, you're putting a tinfoil kufi hat on, T. The same guy did another cover about protests, and the issue wasn't there. But what do you notice? The black men are all dead. They low key. That's what I'm saying. You always gotta look for the backhanded diss. On the other cover, there's black women, the black men. They're living. They're pushing forward. They're crossing the front line, leading an army full of allies, and maybe some possibly black men in the back and on the sides, and the only black man on the front line is the dead one. But on the cover dedicated to the black man is just a dead black man, not a warrior, just a victim. And everybody inside of him is a dead black man too. These are all dead black men. And they're all from the past. The sign is "I am a man." That's not even the current protest sign anymore. If you were to put that today, if you went to a protest today with the sign "I am a man," they would accuse you of being heteronormative and erasing black women and buying into heteropatriarch normativity or something, right? So yeah, I want you to peep the erasure of the warrior class, right? And what that means, and it's consistent with Black Lives Matter and all these new movements. The only good black men, the only black men worth defending, are the dead ones. All the living ones, in their literature, on their website, in their speeches, are only described as problems. They're only described as problems. That's the only description they get. That's the only Now, Time did another cover revolving these protests. Time did another cover. And here's the other cover Time did. Titus Kafar paints a grieving black mother for the cover of Time magazine. And then this is the cover. So there's a woman. She's grieving. So there goes the suffering thing. You know, they love us as suffering experts. You know, our most beautiful trait to them is that we suffer with dignity. But there's no black man. She's a single mother. The black man's not even a single silhouette, so we don't know if he died or whatever. But the baby, if it's a son, is just empty. So there's still the erasure of a warrior class. There's no warrior there. He's not away fighting. He's either probably killed by the cops or he's a deadbeat, I'm sure, is the implication. At least to the casual person watching. There's no sign that he's part of the warrior class. The baby, if it's a boy, it's gone, right? But yeah, if we just keep looking, you're going to see that the subordinate male target hypothesis is it ends up being shown. You know, it ends up being, especially if this is police protest and 94% of the black people killed by the police are men. Why can't you show men fighting for themselves? They are on the front lines. If you look at all the pictures, the videos, whatever, there's women, there's men, there's queers, there's straights, there's whites. Like, it's not that the black men aren't there. Why are you pretending that they're not? Why are you willing to show everybody but them? If you only show black people, you omit the black man. And liberals are trying to enact subordinate male target hypothesis and social dominance through the carrot. You know, they're trying to use a carrot to lure people into that idea. Whereas conservatives are trying to create that reality of subordinate male target hypothesis and social dominance with a stick. They want to beat society into that, and they want to be indiscriminate. They're happy to beat everybody down. So yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much everything. It's really interesting, and I know the tinfoil Kufi hat was there in a pretty interesting way. You know, someone said necro-capitalism. That's a real good way to put it. But oh, I didn't notice. This is crazy. This way, someone meant by necro-capitalism. Anyone remember when Fernando Castile was murdered and the area he was killed in, the houses went up shortly in value after? That's sick. Um, yep. What's going on, Mario? How you feeling? But peep this. I want to play the last thing. Last thing I want to play is that video from the divester, and I hate to say it, but I feel she kind of made a point. As usual, divestors always fly off the rails, so she took it too far. But to her credit, though, unlike the liberal black women, she didn't just roll over and take it as a compliment, you know. Whereas I think like the intersectionals and who want to be centered all the time and want to be the face of black struggle and who want to use black struggle as a come up, they want to use dead black bodies to kind of come up and make it big. They kind of like the backhanded compliments or the mascotting, but because I think the divestors are more open about divesting from Blackistan and achieving honorary whiteness, they don't want to be really mascotted. In a strange way, they almost have more of a pride, even though they're more toxic. In some ways, they have more of a pride in the intersectionals and the academics who just want to be mules for the Democratic Party or for white liberals, right? But peep this video, and I'll play a couple minutes of it, and tell me what you think. Tell me if the sound works, first of all. I've played her before.
Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here today. I had to push everything aside to talk about this today. So this morning, around 7 a.m., Time Magazine decided to post a picture, their new cover of Time Magazine, which is a black woman. It's the side profile of a black woman with natural hair, dark skin, of course, and on the cover, it like have pictures in her hair and kind of like a natural hairstyle. So now all of a sudden they know what a dark-skinned black woman, what an actual black woman looks like. In her hair, it has, if you zoom in, you can see it has like a picture of, I guess, people protesting, and the sign says, "I am a man."
She's making some sense here, but she's gonna go off the rails. But
how much more evidence do we need? How many more times are we gonna see the image of black women being masculinized before we address it, and before all black women, whether you choose to be?
And I think she's kind of right about that. They masculinize black women because they want to create the idea that black women are the new warrior class of the black people, and that the black men are useless, and that but it's also like a backhanded compliment, because they're kind of making fun of the black woman stereotype of being masculine. And to her credit, as toxic as she is, unlike a lot of these intersectionals or blue checks, she at least kind of realizes that it's an insult and whatever. In some strange ways, she's a little more appraised of reality. But her problem being a divestor is, of course, she's going to find a way to make it that they're doing it to protect or flatter black men somehow. But that's the funny part. But
be divested or not, how many more times are we going to allow the media to continue to portray us as masculine and manly? I mean, how belligerent is that?
She's right.
Covers of magazines, especially a magazine as old and as powerful as the Time Magazine,
she called it the Time Magazine. She didn't call it Time.
So
she called it the Time.
And I'm pretty sure it wasn't a black woman. Whatever artist that decided this was okay, whether it was done intentionally or subconsciously, I'm not going to give anybody the benefit of the doubt enough to say it's not intentional.
Yep, this is exactly what it's like.
It's intentional because we've seen time and time again how people like to contribute dark skin and unambiguous black women with masculinity.
This is very true.
Because the bottom line is, when it's time to perform Black womanhood on TV, 9 times out of 10, they find the lightest thing, the most mixed thing, the most diluted Black woman that they can find.
And she's right. When it's time to show a sexy Black woman and stuff, they don't put images like that. When it's time to show a place where warrior men should be, they put a tired-looking, masculinized Black woman on. Either masculinized because she just has certain physical features, or masculinized because she is coded as queer and performing male genderhood. If you notice, that's what they keep doing when they make images of these new protests, or the people that they elevate. They try to bring women on. They try to have them be like kind of exude a type of masculine energy, either through their sexual orientation or their mannerisms or whatever. I hate to admit that she's right, but she makes you feel better because she goes horribly off the rails later.
To portray us, but when it's time to portray a manly aesthetic, push a manly narrative, all of a sudden everybody knows what an unambiguous Black woman looks like. And I'm here to let everybody know Black.
See, so she's right. We're trying to portray Black beauty, Black womanhood. They look for some kind of racially ambiguous thing. Even the woman's dark skin, she'll have some kind of something phenotypically coded that, is white. There's a few exceptions, but when it's time to show something masculine, instead of showing a Black man, they show you a masculine, unambiguously black woman. That's when they show you the unambiguously Black woman, like no makeup, natural hair. She's just basically, or she's queer and performing manhood.
Black women, we are done. We are done being mules. Of course, there's still going to be Black women that want to be mules. My side of history, okay? Black women, we are done. We tired of muling. We tired of fighting. We're tired of being the face of fighting. Because I'm going to tell you like this. I didn't
Real
have
talk.
any notes for this video because I figured once I get started, the words will just keep coming. But the thing is, what people like to do is portray Black women as manly.
Okay.
And then
I'm with you.
Act like they don't know what they just did. And then, of course,
I'm with her.
Every single comment under Time magazine is Black women saying, no, we're not okay with this. Not one Black woman is giving a hand clap. You'll find a Black man.
Now, this is true. A lot of Black women kind of objected to this, but none of the ones objecting I saw were like those blue check type of academic types. These are just like regular Black women. I don't really know what the actual blue check class. I saw nothing but compliments from like the blue check class. I saw Ava DuVernay say good things and stuff like that. It was like regular Black women who weren't liking that picture, and God bless them. Like I respect them. That's one thing I say about a lot of these weirdos don't represent regular Black people.
Man or two, some white people, a couple of those trying to say, oh, this is just so epic. It's up to each and every one of us as Black women to gatekeep the way people portray us. Because at some point, we do play a part in our own demise. And listen, to put this,
I was really scared about this video because I was agreeing with her too much.
This is point blank dangerous. It's no other way to put it. This is putting a target on Black women's back.
Yep.
White liberal media is
trying
so hard to remove the target.
This
from
is true.
Black males.
Storm has
that they're now putting a target on
Black
women.
Now here is where she loses it. This is why I love her.
Liberal media is trying so hard to.
This is why I love her.
Okay, this is dangerous.
Here's where she goes off the rails.
Point blank dangerous. It's no other way to put it. This is putting a target on Black women's back. White liberal media is trying so hard to remove the target from Black males that they're now putting a target on Black women's. And in case
you said Black women's. Oh my God, I love her. I love her.
Come across my video who's not hip to this conversation. The bottom line is when Black women continue to be portrayed in the media as masculine, as manly. I mean, this is so belligerent. They literally had a sign that says, "I am a man," and a Black woman's afro. Like, can it get any more in your face than what it is now? I mean, how many more times and how many different ways and more belligerent and in your face can it get before Black women wake up and realize that these things aren't accidental, that this pattern of things puts our lives in danger? Because when white people, when police officers start to see Black men online crying and Black men,
this is where she loses it big time,
about just how tired they are of being Black men instead of doing what men should do and build their own infrastructure and fight back, because you are the exact ones who have the physical strength to fight back instead of sitting down and letting women do it.
So that's what's the funny thing. She was batting 1,000, but she ended up making it that the white liberal media has removed the warrior class from the pictures to protect Black men and make Black women the targets. So she turned it into, she was doing really good, and I should have let my guard down. She has somehow turned it into that somehow the white liberal media loves Black men that much, and they just were doing all this so that Black women could be seen as more masculine, and then the police and the racists and the thugs cannot go after them, and they're effeminizing the Black men to keep them safe. And I'm like, where on earth does this? Where on earth does that even come from? I don't think these women are liberals or conservatives. They're just whatever is anti-Black at the time, you know. But yeah, that was really funny. I love how she somehow said that first she said it was true, that that's really what's happening on the front lines, that Black men are just staying home, they're not on the front lines, and that the pictures are depicting reality, that Black men don't want to actually fight or do whatever. So it's not so the agenda is against the Black women. What the pictures are doing is they're accurately capturing Black women in the front lines, but making them look masculine and whatever, so that white supremacists and policemen can target them, and they're doing it to protect and leave Black men safe. Why? I have no idea. I mean, the fact that 94% of the Black people get killed by cops are men, and most of the Black people in prison far and wide are Black men. If there's an agenda to protect specifically Black men, the liberal media is doing a really bad job at it. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it was kind of funny because that was the first time I ever saw her like spitting, and then she did a hard swerve and drove it right into a brick wall. Yeah. So that was funny. So no unity was derived from that, but yeah, I mean, that's basically that. That's it for tonight. A lot of tinfoil koofy moments, but you might need to watch this more than once. And if you want to donate to Champagne Sharks, help us buy books, help us buy stuff for the podcast. We buy a lot of books that we read that our guests give on. If the guest isn't able to give us free copies, it's always appreciated. On the way out, feel free to hit us with the Cash App. It's always appreciated. Anyone who gave Cash App it's not Cash App, I meant Super Chat. Please feel free to hit us with the Super Chat. Anybody that I forgot to shout out and thanks for donating, it wasn't on purpose. I was probably looking at another screen. So thanks to everyone who donated that I didn't shout out. And y'all got me crying. The chats are, yeah, that's true. Her makeup does look great. I'm gonna say I don't think she's unattractive. You know, I think she's a little crazy. You know, but that vocal affectation that she's trying, which I feel like to sound white, sounds really kind of crazy. But yeah, Yeah, my recommendations are fucked up now. It's because I keep showing you guys those videos. YouTube keeps sending me more and more of them, but they're kind of educational and they're really entertaining because I'm like addicted to watching where they're gonna go next. Like when I saw that one and I thought she was spitting, I was like, oh my god, has she seen the light? Is there gonna be solidarity coming? And then when she took it, like she did a hard left and made it about protecting black men. Her name is Danielle Danielle. Her name is Danielle Danielle. If you search Danielle Danielle on YouTube, yeah, check it, just check her out. Yeah, that was so funny. They had to tie it back together and find some way. Like, it'll be a great game. Like, back in the days when me and my boys used to freestyle and like in a circle and stuff, we used to play a game where you had to throw out a word and the person had to like rhyme with the word. I want to see a game these people do where you just throw out a topic and they have to find a way to end it by blaming black men. I would watch that YouTube channel all day long. It would melt my brain, but I would want to see that. Like, just because I want to see how creative like they would get. It would really be hilarious. Yeah. But anyway, thanks y'all and everyone who donated. Thanks. Yeah, she was freestyling. She was spitting for sure. The mental gymnastics were strong. Everybody, take care and take this advice. Don't do what I did. If you're gonna watch it, watch it with a incognito or burner account. Yeah. Don't ruin your recommendations for life the way I did. All right. And take care, everybody. Be good.